Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the internet's premier debate review show.
Yeah.
We've
No,
got
I'll
to get
agree
the
with that.
marketing in somewhere.
Do it.
I am
I'm
going.
right on board. I'm right on board.
Yes.
Let's do it. Let's do it. The premiere, the most enlightened yet sophisticated debate show that you will ever encounter today, presumably.
It is the most global that I'm aware of because we're as close to antipodal as
that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that is actually true. It is a world-renowned because I renown it and you renown it, and that's basically the world. Everything else is just an added extra, right? Like it's just Australia and America, everything. Anyway.
Yeah. So I'm joined as always by everyone's favorite debate Australia. I'm sucking at this today. Mark Reed is here.
You're fine.
My
You're
usual
fine.
companion and cohort.
Your partner in crime. I think yes. The support criminal to your yeah.
I wanted to say my favorite Australian debater, but I'm not entirely sure that some of our other Australian friends aren't also debaters, and I don't want to make them feel bad, so I stopped mid-sentence. I'm like,
Look, we've got a weird relationship with our Kiwi brothers and sisters. Like we love them, we adore them, we will hassle them constantly. They'll hassle us, but don't you dare pick on them. It's like a little brother or little sister. It's like, don't you dare pick on them. That is just no, absolutely not.
Yeah, I really appreciate a lot of things about New Zealand. Their immigration policies are strict.
Well, it depends who you are. Apparently, if you're Peter Thiel, they're not so strict, apparently. So, there's that.
I don't know.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not sort of exclusive saying that's exclusive New Zealand. There's definitely a few people who, I don't know, get priority treatment in the Australian immigration system as well. I just think that it's got more to do with the color of their money than any kind of cultural adaptability to the cultural underpinnings of that country. It's got more to do with the insane amount of tax revenue they'll bring in or the connections they have within the government than any kind of adherence to the zeitgeist, the culture of the country. Because Peter Thiel does not adhere to anybody's culture and has basically given up on humanity. So I don't know where he fits into the sort of, very, very fraternal and sort of cisternal. What's the sister one?
Sororital?
Sororital, yes. Ideas that sort of New Zealand has. Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know if there's a really, because like that's the closest I can like get the term to go by modifying it a little bit. But I think when most people use fraternity in a nationalistic sense, like the way the French did, brotherhood, equality, and fraternity, they were doing it in a mankind sort of way, where it's just like we're just gender neutraling the term for this purpose.
Right. No, and I totally get that, but I think that. I think that when those ideas in the Enlightenment came about, they were kind of, oh, well, it's a brotherhood of man. Women, who cares about women? Like women weren't really a priority thought, which means that, hey, Enlightenment was a good starting point, but we don't have to stop there, people. We don't have to go, well, that was a good point to start, but, let's just back in the kitchens, everybody. Like seriously, are you high?
Women, they can't even vote.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It is worth noting though that
siblingity. Yes. You know what? Can I steal that word? I really want to steal that word. I've got on my Discord. I've got like words that I've used that I've come up to give words to things that have no words. Like for instance, I use a word to describe. You know the spaghetti claw thing. I do not have a name for that. Right, like where you get a spaghetti claw that like scoops up spaghetti.
I just call it a claw. I literally call it a claw.
So I came up with a term called a spagula, right? Like, because it's for spaghetti and it's kind of like a spatula. So that's what I use. And so I've listed these on my Discord when I come up with them, actually. Margieisms, I love it. I absolutely adore it. That is amazing. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
We're coining all kinds of terms up in here today.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. We've also right. I probably should say for anybody who's just joining us, it's been a minute. Today.
Oh yeah.
It's well, you've probably already read the title or the thumbnail or something, but it's Alex O'Connor versus Trent Horn. For some reason, my brain wanted to say Ben Shapiro, and I'm like, no, not this time.
No,
but it is part 2. Part 1 is over on Mark's channel, so by all means, hang out with us tonight. But to catch the first part, it's linked in the description. But yes, if you're watching in the future, hello future people, please remember to subscribe. Mark and I take turns, and last time we were at Mark's, and so that's why part 1 is there. Next time we'll be back at Mark's. However, there's a slight delay of game because I'm going to be out of state next weekend. I'll be in Nashville for the NanoCon convention, making me and I believe Forrest Valkai simultaneously the only people ever to go to both NanoCon and NocoCon.
Fair enough.
And I may be the only person who cares about that.
But maybe there will be some random NocoCon attender that is going to be that. We don't know that. All right, that Venn diagram may not be overlapping that much, but you know, there's a place there. There's definitely a place there.
Who knows? But it should be an interesting time, and I'll try. I don't know what Signal's going to be like. We'll see, but I'll try to keep people updated on things. But that's where I'll be next weekend. So,
okay. Yes. That sounds delightful. I would come if it was within range and I could afford it. I definitely would, but it's not, and I can't. So there you go.
Yeah, I get that. I'm on the same continent at least, and it's still a heroic effort to get there. So it'll be a literal trip.
Yeehaw. Some heroic idiocy going down over here at Better Than Ember, which is my favorite type of idiocy, to be honest with you. That's another term that I kind of love, the whole idea of heroic idiocy. I kind of apply it to anybody doing stupid things, or, you know, bearing the brunt of stupid things in order to, you know, draw attention to it. So I think that, you know, when Sacha Baron Cohen, like the guy that did Borat, he's like going around being an idiot to show racism and stuff. That's what I think is heroic idiocy. You know, it is stupid, but it's for a good cause. You know, like it's good for a good purpose. That is heroic. Absolutely.
Yeah, do it for the bit, or rather to make a point. A social, literary reasons, journalistic reasons. Yes.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Oh goodness. Speaking of heroic idiocy,
woohoo!
Trent was about to say something. So where we last left our hero.
Does he have
to? This debate is about evidence for the resurrection, and so far we haven't actually gotten any. But what did you expect, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, if I'm ever in a debate against Alex O'Connor and he smiles the way that he has when Trent Horn has trotted out these kind of really poor I would be absolutely petrified, because he is actually really enjoying dismantling this guy. He really is enjoying dismantling this man. And I mean, I can't say I blame him, because, you know, there's something really satisfying about pointing out somebody coming up with an argument and you going, but this, and this, and it just dismantles it completely. It's just fascinating to see Alex O'Connor work. Yeah, I think Trent Horn, he's really, I'm amazed he hasn't appealed to the sort of the base facts, the what are they called? What's that thing that guy said? The minimal facts arguments kind of thing. I'm kind of amazed he hasn't gone there. Right. Mike Lacona is the one I was thinking of, and he comes out with those. Well, the minimal facts are this, but Trent Horn seems to be going down it's a route that we've seen before. It's why would these people do what they did if Jesus wasn't a god and didn't rise from the dead? And I think that Alex O'Connor, if you didn't watch the first part, you'll be aware of this if you did, but if you didn't watch the first part, he sort of came out with, well, if you apply that equally to all religions, then the people that followed Muhammad were following a god. The people that, and the one that really stuck in Trent's craw, which is just hilarious, is the Mormon, right? Like Joseph Smith, the people following him were very persecuted, and we have records of how they were at the time. Probably, to be honest, rightfully so in my opinion, because they really were up to no good in a lot of different states. But that aside, they definitely had no incentive to keep following this, chosen person, yet they did. So you would have to acknowledge him as some kind of prophet or some kind of special person, yet he doesn't. And I think pointing this out is really good. And, Trent seems to be aware that he's doing this, because he's like, oh, you'd like me to be sort of, you're saying it's inconsistent. And O'Connor's like, yes. Yeah, it's inconsistent, because if you want to hinge your belief in Jesus upon, oh, but the disciples got such a hard time, then be consistent, because the people that followed Joseph Smith got such a hard time as well. And they did it even while being thrown out of the church. They still claimed he was a prophet of God. So
they really had no reason, because apologists like Trent will make the case, well, they had no reason to lie. Some of them died. Fair enough. Some of them died, not necessarily for that, but all of them became very rich. That many of them went and set up churches and became saints in their own areas and so on and so forth. Like, they each ran their own mini religion, all under the same umbrella.
Well, that's basically what the disciples did. I mean, you've got the Eastern Orthodoxy that believes that they are the inheritors of the kingdom of God, because they have their doctrines, their basically their dogma passed down from two of the disciples. I think it is Luke and Matthew, I want to say. I could be wrong on that, but anyway, they say they're the inheritors of the correct Christianity. But then you've got, the Church of Rome, the papacy, saying that they're the inheritors of Peter's religion. Like Peter was the one that founded the Church of Rome. So you've got these different sort of splinter groups that disagree with one another, but saying, hey, they're the correct one. Like, the same thing happened. So yeah, I don't know. It's yeah. And look at the Muslims. Like, you've got the Shia and the Sunni religions. Like, they're very, very different. I mean, yes, they both worship Allah, they both have the Quran, they both, adhere to prayers and things like that. But in the way that the religion is structured, like the Sunni believe that, hey, Muhammad wanted a committee of people to be sort of not elected, but chosen by the faithful that would represent them, while the Shia think that hey, it's the descendants of Muhammad that are supposed to inherit his leadership. Like, it couldn't be more different.
Yeah. And so many religions are like that, even if they agree on the baseline doctrines, and that isn't even always the case with Christianity, like, at all.
Yeah.
But c'est la vie. All right, let's see what Trent has to say, I suppose.
Do we have to?
I know we could just keep talking about terms for cooking equipment.
Sure. Hey, I'm right there. Look, do you ever get excited when you go? Like, I always get excited when I go into a homeware store. Like, okay, I'm weird. All right, I know this. Just don't at me. Okay, I know. But I always get excited at all the things that I think I could use the cooking stuff for that I never will use. Like, I go, oh, I can use them to make, lemon muffins, and I'm never going to do it. Right? I know I'm never going to do it, but I'm like, it's the possibilities that excite me. So let's leap it back in. Trent, the possibilities. Excite me with your possibilities, mate. Please.
Is Trent capable of... Well, we'll see.
Peter, Paul, and I want to just cover that because I worked backwards from what you said. Yeah. I agree with you. The argument, who would die for a lie, is a horribly bad one. It's a horrible argument because Muslim suicide bombers do that all the time. The Tamil Tigers, there's people who die for things that are a lie.
Well, they die for what they believe in. Trent calls it a lie, but they don't think so.
Right. Yeah, and but I think he is saying that it's a bad argument because they don't consider it a lie, right? Because they think that it's true. And I do agree with him. That's a terrible argument because they have that liar, lunatic lord, right? This sort of false trilemma kind of thing that hey, either the apostles or the disciples are lying, they're completely, irrational lunatics that are deluded, or he was actually a god. And nowhere in there does it give the chance that, hey, they were mistaken, right? They genuinely believed for good reasons, right, that this person had some kind of divinity, and they were just wrong. That it was or legend, for instance, where they followed this guy, were mistaken, and then he didn't actually turn water into wine or do any of these miracles. That was sort of built up around him with stories coming out. So that is a terrible argument. I agree with Trent. I at least he's acknowledging that.
Yeah. They have so many terrible arguments. My goodness.
But he's kind of using it though, sort of saying, why would they die for this person? So number one, and I think that O'Connor probably went over this a little bit. Number one, we don't know that the disciples died for their beliefs, right? So in the records that we've got, it's sort of church tradition that, for instance, Peter was crucified upside down in order to sort of, mock his faith kind of thing. There's no record of that. There's no historical documents saying that that's actually how he died, and that's why he died, right? Like there's none whatsoever. That's just something that's been passed on by the church. We have, I believe it was Simon, the one referred to as brother of Jesus. He was stabbed in Africa, and they sort of say, oh, he was martyred. Really? We don't know why he was stabbed. Like, he could have cheated a person. We don't know. It could have been a poker game gone wrong. Okay, poker wasn't invented. I know, just relax. But, it could have been, right, it could have been a dice game. It could have been anything. He could have mocked somebody's god. We don't know why he was actually killed, and we don't know if he got any chance to recant or repent or say, hey, I was joking about the Jesus kind of thing before he died. We don't know. It's just the church says, oh, they died and they refused to recant their beliefs. Really? How do you know that? We don't. We have no idea.
In a way, the fact that they say that without knowing it I mean, it's not a lie in the normal sense we think of it, but they're claiming they have confirmed a thing is true when they haven't, and that's deceptive. So you could say they're doing it, but details.
Yeah.
Question is, who would die for something that they know is a lie? That's the clear question. So in early Mormonism, I grant you, there are many, many Mormons who went out, were willing to endure persecution, things like that. But most of those people, if they weren't the original.
It's a weird question. Who would willingly die for something they know is the truth? Like, I mean, I guess if you thought it was worth it, but in that context, a lie could be worth it too. The fact that it's true or false doesn't automatically convey worthiness to die for. In fact, there are many people who do die for a thing they know is a lie. Like, for example, many people in the United States military are there for various reasons, to escape hostile home environments or difficult neighborhoods or to access GI benefits or whatever the case may be. But they know this whole American dream thing is a lie. They still put their lives on the line, you know?
Right. Yes. So I think that I think that he's alluding to, like, basically who wouldn't acknowledge a lie in order to save their lives, right? Like, and I think that there's a sort of lurking problem in there that you're assuming, well, number one, like I said earlier, that they had a chance to say, hey, it's a lie. You know, I didn't actually mean it, because a lot of people don't. You know, if a service member is captured by the enemy, they may very well say, hey, America is morally bankrupt. It's a terrorist organization, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot more of them are killed without being able to say that. You know, like, would they say that if it gives them a chance to save their lives? Yeah, they may do. I wouldn't blame them. You know what I mean? Like, make it home to your family. Like, seriously, I wouldn't blame you for that. But a lot of them are just like the instance of the stabbing. Like, we don't know they had a chance to say, hey, I don't actually believe that. Please don't kill me, right? And the other thing is that even if they know it's a lie, right, it may be worth it for some people in a purely pragmatic sense to support a lie even to their death. And I'll explain what I mean. Because you've got to understand the context at which these people were living. They were living under Roman occupation, and Christianity was more than just a religion in isolation. It was also kind of like a social movement. It would sort of tried to promote the poor, promote women. It did have a social movement aspect to it. So if I was a Iron Age Palestinian laboring and a Jew in the Middle East, and my entire country was occupied by a foreign enemy that I saw as incredibly evil, like just the most evil thing ever, would I lie to support a movement that may be able to overthrow them? I may well do, right? Like, I may actually say, hey, the ends justify the means. If this will get the people to overthrow these horrendous Romans and cast down the Pharisees that are working with the Romans that I see as conspiring with them, I may support that. Now, I'm not in that position, of course, but being in that position, a person might say, hey, even though I don't believe it, I am going to use this to overthrow the evil that I see before me.
Yeah. Sometimes the values merit it. The goal. Well, I mean, you already said that. Ends justify the means. Sometimes it actually is true.
Yep.
11 witnesses would not have been in a place to know whether it's true or false. So it doesn't say much.
Isn't that the same as the Gospels?
In that regard?
You just said, like, you said that there were lots of early believers who went out and were willing to be persecuted, but unless they were the original 11 witnesses, they wouldn't have seen it directly. I was actually unclear for a second whether you were talking about Mormonism or Christianity.
No. And I agree with you. So for me, the martyrdom or the risk of martyrdom for the apostles, and I disagree. I would recommend for our listeners, get Sean McDowell's book, The Fate of the Apostles. It's published by Routledge. It is an academic study
And if you decide to get that book, make sure to watch Paulogia's video about it, because it's hilarious.
So books are not an academic study. Okay, like you can say, hey, this book draws upon academic studies. I don't think Sean McDowell's book does. I think it is just a, hey, this is what the documents in the church say. And the argument that I have heard is, who else would know the fate of the disciples and apostles apart from the early church? And it's like, yes, but the early church had a lot of motivation to make the disciples into martyrs. A lot of motivation.
Mm-hmm. And add on to the fact that they're not exactly the most reliable keepers of history. You know, after all, we have all the original manuscripts. Oh, wait, we don't. And we have the empty tomb.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we don't. Like,
right,
no part of early Christian history matches church tradition.
Right.
Not one bit. So,
and we know that the church has done something called interpolation. It happens so often that we have a freaking word for it. And that is when an outside entity, some kind of outside scribal source, puts their version of events into an earlier work and copies it around. So that is what the source is saying from back then, but that isn't what the source originally said. And we know that they did this with the most famous example is Josephus, who basically had this thing inserted into his work saying that he believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Just one problem, Josephus Flavius was a Jew, devout Jew all of his life. And we know it was inserted because there's other copies around without it in there.
Mm-hmm. And my goodness, like, it's so well documented. Like, it appeared in Origen's library in Alexandria in what was it, the 4th century or something. And then he started getting letters from other scholars who had copies that didn't have that interpolation, advising him that his copy appears to have been altered.
Yeah.
Like, do you suppose? Maybe. But also, being an actual Jew rather than, you know, a Greek person who's Jew adjacent, what do they call them? Gentiles, Pharisees, whatever the case may be. Josephus knew what the prophecy of the Messiah was supposed to be. He would become king, he would drive out the invaders and restore the throne of David.
Yep.
He lived after Jesus was already dead, and so he knew Jesus did not do those things, and therefore he would not think he was the Messiah.
On the fate of the 12 apostles. And he puts in very high historical confidence, we can know that at least Peter, Paul, and James, the brother of Jesus, were martyred, and we have evidence from the others as well.
Sorry, but, I think I said Simon earlier. It was James that was the one that was supposed to be stabbed in Africa. So when he says, I think I said Simon, it was James. That reminds me. So he's not wrong. Like, these people, we know their deaths, but the question is, were they martyred? Were they killed for their religious beliefs? We don't know that. So I think it's a bit of a stretch to say, hey, we can confirm that they were martyred when we don't actually have why they were killed. Were they mugged? Was it an argument? Was James incredibly drunk and spouting off about something? We don't know. Like, why do we just assume that it's definitely for his religion?
Yeah, it's not like he's walking the streets of Belfast and there's a clique behind him and a voice asks in his ear, "Be ye Catholic or Protestant, laddie?" Like, come on now. Goodness.
For that, First Clement speaks about it very early. John also looks toward Peter's. But my point is that what I said was also, we see in Paul's own writings and in Acts, there was a willingness to be martyred. And my point would be that these...
What?
There's a willingness to be martyred. Is there? Did James write anything? I really want to know.
I'm not sure. I'm not super familiar with the New Testament. You'd have to ask one of our specialist friends. But like, why though?
Well, I mean, I know that the book of James is supposed to have been, like, the early church says, hey, the book of James was written by James, the brother of Jesus, but like that's highly contested in scholarly circles, kind like that. We don't know that is the case, and I don't, you know.
I mean, I could kind of see a certain kind of zealot saying something like, how gleeful if I'm martyred for the glory of the Lord, you know, to give my life to spread his glory, something, probably end up in heaven, whatever they say, that sort of. But like, I don't think that's like, sure, they're zealots, right? But the zealots are usually a few generations downstream of the actual event.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm probably silly.
Apostles go out. They don't seem to do it for any kind of earthly reward, like we might see with someone like Joseph Smith. They do it for the fervency of communicating this message. The risk of martyrdom is something that is an argument for the sincerity of one's testimony. So I believe that the apostles were sincere, and Paul was sincere, and we don't have a similar in Mormonism, a fervent opponent of Mormonism.
Paul never met Jesus. Let's like back up on this just a bit. Paul never met Jesus. Okay, he saw a light and heard a voice. Okay, whether that was Jesus or not, like you're saying, hey, that was Jesus. Okay, he believed it was Jesus, but was it? Like, it's so weird that they're sort of saying Paul believed so sincerely in the things that he saw. What did he see?
Heat stroke?
Maybe.
I mean, people having hallucinations. I mean, I realize that Christianity has this whole thing with revelatory visions, and so visions are baked in as a valid thing that a person can have. But I mean, a hallucination isn't really the best basis for founding a religion. On the other hand, some of the largest and most successful religions seem to have been found on either hallucinations or claims of hallucination. Like, for example, Muhammad, peace be upon him, who's like, oh, I met an angel in the cave over there, and he told me I'm supposed to run the world. So, you know, let's go do that.
Yeah, and plus, how did Paul die? Like, how did Paul die? We don't know. Like the churches say what he was beheaded or something. Like he was a Roman citizen, so he evaded the crucifixion punishment, but he was beheaded. But we don't know that. Like it's just this assumption that everything that the early church says is true, even though you have to acknowledge that the early church had a high degree of motivation to have these martyrdoms occur.
Additionally, even the church saying a thing straight up happened, like, say, written in the literal Gospels, and you end up with two conflicting stories. Because, like, how did Judas die? Like, that isn't even just early church tradition. It's in the damn Gospels, happening two different ways.
Yeah.
So these sources are not reliable.
Church, who then converts and comes to believe. When I have a Paul figure like that, so I think Christianity is unique there. I would say that they're very sincere, and so we have to grapple with how to explain their sincere testimony.
But we do have accounts of people who fall out with the church and yet hold fast to the vision that they had. I mean, the thing that's important here is, did they see what they claimed to see? There's like I mean, so much to say on the Martyrdom of the Apostles. You know, I agree that book is well worth reading. First Clement, as you know, Trent, as in Clement's first epistle, which is where this reference comes to Peter, says he says, let's consider the good apostles. He says, there was Peter, who by reason of unrighteous jealousy endured not one but many labors, and thus having X went to his appointed place of glory. And some people say been martyred, but as you know, Trent, like this really just means borne his testimony. That's what the word means. Like I'm not saying that we know Peter wasn't martyred, but this idea of an early testimony in Clement, all Clement actually says is that he bore his testimony and then went to his appointed place of glory, which could mean that he went around, you know, did his wonderful preaching and then rested on his laurels because he'd done such a great job. We don't know for sure. In fact, you know, Christian tradition has it that Peter was crucified upside down. If you ever look at artwork of Peter's death, it's always being crucified upside down. And I always love to ask people, what is the actual earliest textual source that we have for the martyrdom of Peter being crucified upside down? I'm not sure if our listeners know. I'm not sure if you two know. It's the Apocryphal Acts of Peter. In other contexts, when we talk
the Apocrypha, oh no,
the Apocrypha. Yeah, so things that were not put in the Bible because the church went, these are not true works, kind of thing.
So we got people believing stuff that the church looked at the Gospel of John and all the Superman Jesus parts and went, yep, stamp of approval. But this book, too far.
Well, can we talk about John? Like, it's funny that you bring up John because do you know how John is supposed to have died in early church tradition?
I don't.
So he's the one that was supposedly boiled in oil. But if you go back to the earliest church tradition, the story is that he was boiled in oil, but somehow came out miraculously unfazed by all of this boiling, just completely nonplussed. And then because they couldn't kill him, the Romans sent him to an island where he then wrote Revelation. That's what the early church said. But the part about him sort of, miraculously not being able to be killed was kind of dropped as they went along because it's so ridiculous. Like, this is the thing about the early church. They made shit up. They just made it up, right? Even if he was killed, the early church said that he was boiled in oil. They couldn't kill him. Then he was banished to some island, and then he wrote Revelation, kind of thing. And that's what they said. And then they sort of went, let's just drop that one. That isn't. He was just boiled in oil. That's fine. That's fine.
Isn't that such a weird? It'd be like if people today went and grabbed all the remaining rune stones of the Norse mythology, and we were like, okay, clearly, a lot of this stuff is just shit people made up with magic and whatnot. But people died believing this. Therefore, there must be something true in here. So we need to establish what the facts are from this mythology.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, well, Eric the Red would never have gone, sailed west and found Greenland if he didn't actually see something that was true, right? No.
Just oh goodness. Well, I mean, people get insufferable with that kind of thing because, like, there's some accounts that Christopher Columbus originally intended to go on a crusade to liberate the Holy Land, but he had a vision of three spirits, which he took to be the Trinity, that told him to go west instead and bring Christianity to the Indies, which is why he was so hell-bent on crossing the Atlantic. Now, that could be something people made up hundreds of years later, or it could be a real thing where the source for it got lost and now people just kind of believe it, or it got mangled somewhere along the way. We have no way to know, but it's out there, But now people are grabbing onto it and they're going, oh, well, I mean, Christopher Columbus really did cross the Atlantic because he had a vision. Therefore, the Trinity is real.
Yeah.
Aye.
About apocryphal texts, we're told to be absolutely suspicious of their historicity and myth-making. And yet, when it comes to quite an important part of Christian tradition, I don't know if Trent believes that Peter was crucified upside down or not, but if he does, it is interesting to me that the earliest textual source that we have for that is an apocryphal text. Trent mentioned apocryphal texts earlier. He said, if we look at the Gospel of Peter, we see these sort of mythological embellishments gone crazy. And he said, and I quote, well, I don't quote directly because I only have a few notes here, but you said about how there were lots of Romans. You said like all of the Romans were at the tomb. You then also said, and angels came down. Those are the two sort of examples that you chose. And then I think to myself, well, just look at Matthew's Gospel. Matthew, who invents Romans at the tomb to do away with the rumor which was being spread that Jesus' body had been stolen. Matthew, who alone has this angel descend down from the heavens and roll the stone away before the eyes of witnesses, stuff that isn't in the other Gospels. In other words, like, I don't know.
Oh, he does not look happy.
Strong, the kind of
He does not look like a happy chappy. Yeah, no, he looks very unhappy with that.
This is just what we were talking about with the two different Judases. Like, the stories conflict, and in this case, the additional information is clearly being added to plug plot holes in the earlier edition.
Yes.
Matthew exists because Mark was such a bad story.
Right. And sort of the way that these things start out as, you know, very mundane kind of things, and over time just get more and more and more embellishments. But, you know, when you go back to the earliest writings, which is Paul's writings, the empty tomb isn't even mentioned, isn't even brought up once in all of his writings to all these different denominations. Not even once does he go, you know, remember the empty tomb, or, you know, he just says that, hey, there were 500 witnesses to Jesus coming back from the dead. That's it.
Yeah, it's as much as he talks about, you know, our faith is justified, and if not for this, and we can rely on that, you have to imagine at some point in one of those, he would go, as long as that empty tomb on Oak Street in Jerusalem remains empty, our faith is as rock solid as the stone that was rolled away from the entrance, or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's clearly not part of the mythology at that point.
But the funny thing is, because especially fundamentalists, but generally Christians cannot acknowledge that any of the gospels were embellished, right? Like, they will say, oh, the apocryphal texts, they were embellished. They were, you know, the infancy gospel of Thomas is a hoot if you read it, because Jesus is kind of like a anti-hero, almost like a supervillain. He kills children, he kills dragons, he does, like, gets wildly angry and strikes down. Like, it is really like Girls Gone Wild kind of stuff. It is a hoot. But like, they will happily go, yeah, that's all myth making and embellishment, but they can't acknowledge that the Matthew one is either. So it brings up these real problems where, do you think this is allegory, that all the saints rose out of their graves, or do you think that's something that actually happened? And that they generally will not be able to acknowledge that that is just an allegorical story, that was just myth making, because then it sort of presents the problem of, well, how much of Luke was myth making, how much of Mark was myth making, how much of this entire thing actually happened? Well, we don't know. It could all be myth making. It could all be that it was added. Don't forget that the long ending of Mark. So Mark ends in the earlier text at I think it's Mark 16:9, and in the later text, in the later text that we find, it goes on. It goes on till 20. And it's wild, because, you know, all of that stuff is things like, you'll be able to tell a Christian by them being able to drink poison and being unaffected, or handle snakes and be completely unaffected by the snake's poison. All of that stuff comes from Mark 9 to 20, or 10 to 20, basically. That wasn't there before. And the wild part is, when you tell a fundamentalist Christian this, they will go, oh, yes, the earlier versions were corrupted. And it's like, how does that work exactly? So we know for a fact that those verses were added at a later date. And Bart Ehrman makes a really good point. How do we know other verses weren't? Because we thought that we knew, you know, Mark was, you know, Mark 16, 1 to 20. That was the book kind of thing. That was the chapter, sorry. No, we were wrong. But the only way we found that is by finding earlier works that did not have those passages in it, did not have those later passages in it. So it could be that, now I'm not saying this, but it is possible that Jesus never did a Sermon on the Mount, that they just wrote it down. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. It is more than likely that there was something, you know, a preaching done, but it is possible that you know, the water to wine thing just never happened, and somebody came along later and put it in. It's possible, because we don't have the originals. And that's really hard for Christians to swallow, because they want to say, hey, it is the most reliable text of our existence, of our entire civilization. And things like the long ending of Mark show that is not true. There are things that have been added. Have things been taken away? We don't know. We don't have the originals.
It's the whole sweater unravels because there's just not enough threads to hold it together.
And too many inconsistencies.
Yeah. I mean, they're like, the apologists love to quote the other historians who came a few generations later. And one of them, I want to say Tacitus, but I could be mistaken on that, references a Gospel of Matthew that is apparently like a songbook. It's not the Gospel of Matthew Mark. It's called the Gospel of Mark, but it's a different gospel.
No, I haven't heard that. Tacitus is usually the one they quote as, oh, Tacitus said that Jesus rose from the dead. And Tacitus only wrote that there are a bunch of people that worshipped a god that they believed to rise from the dead and called themselves Christians. That's sort of what Tacitus wrote. He wrote about Christians, the believers in God. It's like someone writing about Vikings. That doesn't mean that Odin's real. Okay, if you say, hey, there are Northmen who are great of stature and worship a one-eyed god that or worships, a god that throws thunder from the sky. That doesn't mean that the god is real. It just means that you're saying, hey, there's a bunch of Norsemen around. It's wild, the apologetics that we get that are so sort of disingenuous, because you cannot possibly say that Tacitus recorded the death and resurrection of Jesus just because there's these Christians.
Yeah. Let's see. I should make notes about this kind of stuff, but it's not my specialty. But I found on Google two different things. One is Tertullian, who is a church dude, wrote that Mark was the author of Mark, but it's not clear. Another one is Eusebius in the 4th century wrote that a previous writer whose writings are now lost, named Papias, wrote at the end of the 1st century that a version of Mark was Mark was the interpreter for Peter and wrote down what Peter remembered of Jesus's life, though not in strictly chronological order. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Written by eyewitnesses, folks.
Wow.
Like we don't even have Papias's writings. It's Eusebius writing about having read Papias's writings in his own time. What a high bar. What a great evidential standard.
Yeah.
Things you're pointing to as evidences of like myth making in the Gospel of Peter, which you will definitely say is apocryphal, are also present, I think, in Matthew. You also mentioned 1 Corinthians, and I think, I hate to say, Trent, I think you begged the question. You said, well, Paul must believe in a physical resurrection because he compares his experience in 1 Corinthians 15 to those of the apostles, which were physical. One man's modus ponens is another man's modus tollens, Trent. Like, I could just say, yes, well, Paul compared his experience to those of the apostles. So they were the same kind. And you say, well, because the disciples must have been physical, so was Paul. Whereas I say, the only eyewitness account that we have of a resurrection appearance is Paul seeing a vision. And so, yes, if he compares his experience to those of the apostles in 1 Corinthians 15, then I'm led to believe that means that the apostles' experiences were visionary. There's also some evidence here that perhaps, Rudolf.
Right, because if it were physical, then Paul would have seen a physical Jesus, or they're different kinds of experiences.
Yes, but he says, I experienced something like the apostles did. But I don't know. I think that, Paul's coming along a lot later. Like, don't forget that Paul isn't there when the apostles are. He's coming along, 30 years later, saying that he saw a vision and he spoke to people in Jerusalem, and 500 people said, yes, we saw Jesus after he rose from the dead. Like, presumably he was talking to Christians. You know, we don't know who these 500 people were. It seems convenient that it's exactly 500. To be honest with you, it seems made up to me. Like, it just seems like a good number to say, hey, a lot of people saw it.
It's too many to doubt. And they make that argument now.
Yep.
They're mass hallucination, it's too many. But we don't have any confirmation that actually happened. Even if it did happen, we don't know who, we don't have their testimonies, we don't have a way to double check. But also, even just a couple of years later, like, for example, there's major local events happen from time to time, like a big old flood, or the local football team wins a state championship or whatever. And like, just take the state championship thing, you know, maybe a dozen people from town go to the state championship because it's, you know, hundreds of miles away. But in a couple of years, you will easily find 500 people who were at that game.
Right.
Because memory is weird that way. And people really like to, I don't know if like is the right term, but there's a few different psychological phenomena where people edit their memories. Like they're saying something that on one level they know is false, but on a deeper level, they still accept as true. Like they're not lying, even though they're wrong about an event that they themselves experienced in a different way than they're now reporting.
Right.
It's a weird thing, but humans.
Yeah, our memories are incredibly faulty. Our memories are, you know, it's why eyewitness testimony is so unreliable, and we know it's unreliable. By the police absolutely know just how unreliable it is. However, I mean, so the thing that gets me about Paul is they sort of have this idea of, well, Saul of Tarsus, right? Originally known as Saul of Tarsus, persecuting Christians. There's absolutely no reason why this man would convert over to Christianity and promote the religion and try to do all this stuff. And I want to say, isn't there? Like, okay, you're a minor functionary within the Roman civilization. You're persecuting Christians. Just say you just don't like your job. You know, like you don't like it. It's a terrible job. You hate it, and you come across a religion where the religious head has been vacated, and these Christians are milling around with nobody to lead them. I mean, Paul got quite an amount of prestige. He was a very important man afterwards, where he wasn't before. Isn't that enough reason? You know, he obviously did very well for himself, because it describes him as writing from his house, right? Like, he had a lot of stuff that he got through taking control of this religion. And Paul really became the head of the entire religion. Is that not enough for somebody to lie about one vision that they had? I would proffer that, hey, if somebody did that today, like L. Ron Hubbard, what was his motivation for doing? Well, he was kind of, not only did he amass a great amount of wealth, he also was, had the adoration of all of these people. And so why doesn't that apply to Paul? Why doesn't that apply to him? I don't know.
I was trying to look up like what Paul's position as a persecutor was, like what it entailed. And we all have the general idea of they like hunted down Christians and arrested them and imprisoned them and maybe even executed them, depending on the various circumstances and whatnot. But like, what does it mean though? And it seems, based on what I'm finding very quickly here, is that from AD 30 until AD 64, the only persecutors were working on behalf of the Jewish Sanhedrin, rooting out terrorists and disruptive agents. under the label of Christianity. But in 64, Nero made it a empire-wide offense to be a Christian because of the destabilizing influence of the terrorists. So either Paul was not a Roman persecutor, he was a merc working for the Sanhedrin, or he lived a little bit later than conventional wisdom leads us to believe.
Maybe.
Maybe I'll look into that more some other time.
Portman's idea that the transfiguration of Jesus was originally a post-resurrection appearance. What's one good piece of evidence for this, perhaps? The fact that the first person Paul mentions in his list of people is Peter, the most important of the disciples, who nowhere else is any kind of appearance to Peter mentioned.
Except I think there's an allusion in Luke, isn't there?
An allusion.
There's an allusion to an
Christ,
appearance.
he's risen and has appeared to Peter. Yes.
Yes. Sorry. I mean, like in terms of like a narrative event, in terms of like a narrative event of what actually happens to Peter, right? We don't see this anywhere, but we do see this happen at the Transfiguration, where Peter is specifically taken up the mountain to see this event. And so I think there's some good evidence to suggest that maybe that might have been the original appearance of Peter, maybe even the one that Luke alludes to. That's kind of a bit besides the point.
Trent, I wonder whether we could probe further your views into the martyrdom. What do you make of the evidence that Alex just presented?
Right. So what I said, and I've been continually saying, is that it is not the martyrdom of the apostles per se that proves Jesus' resurrection or anything like that. What we are trying to do is we want to establish the sincerity of testimony. So, for example, there's a lot of strange sightings.
Does the sincerity of testimony does it matter? People can sincerely be wrong. I mean, here in the United States, something like 75% of the people behind bars are on wrongful convictions. Like, sincere people can be very mistaken.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's frustrating when the entire case is built on testimony because there's no evidence. And I realize eyewitness testimony or even records of testimony are technically evidence in the same way a Spider-Man comic is evidence of Spider-Man. Neither is good evidence. So when I say evidence, I don't think of things of such a very low standard that a known fictional novelty is of equal caliber, you know? So to me, when I say evidence, yes, technically that's evidence, but it doesn't even rise to the level of bad evidence in my book. It's like, it's not even on the radar. So the fact we have to resort to this sort of stuff, it's a little bit frustrating because from any kind of rational point of view, we should say the fact that this is the best you've got means no one should believe this. Like, if they want to believe it, that's maybe, but like, is there a reason to believe it though? Not so much.
I've read other books trying to downplay the resurrection, and they'll make comparisons to Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or aliens or things like that. And I think in many of those cases, though, there's good evidence that the testimony may not be sincere because it's often positively received. You get to be in the news, people get to celebrate you. It's all well and good in that respect. But what I'm showing is that the early proclaimers of Jesus's resurrection, who would have known whether it really happened or not if they just simply made the whole thing up. So Paul and Peter and the original apostles.
And if they did make it up, then you'd end up with everybody telling a different story. Oh, wait.
Yeah. There are different stories, yes.
Like, they're so different. They're not even when one copy is directly from another, they're still not even compatible.
That they're willing to endure threats to their lives. And that's very clear in Paul's letters, that he's stoned, thrown out of synagogues, worried about what the Romans may do to them. So I think that's very clear. Now, I think when one leads that all the way to martyrdom, it's even more evidence of sincerity. When it comes to Peter's martyrdom, I think many people interpret Clement of Rome as speaking of that. Ignatius of Antioch also talks about it in an indirect way in AD 107.
The Gospel of John as well.
Yes, and that's another important one about the death you will endure. And John, of course, would have been written 30 years after Peter died.
Which was they could actually lean into is saying the reason that they were so convinced that they didn't want to die, but they weren't afraid to die, is because they sincerely believed that by believing they would be raised again. And so it removed that consequence for them. that, not the truth of the belief, but the knowledge that they would live again if they were faithful to Jesus, is what made them willing to die. But that's just the direction I would take the argument.
And I do have to note that at the time you had, like, so when he's talking about 30 years after Paul wrote what he wrote, right? So Paul's writings are first roughly 30 years afterwards. Then 30 years afterwards, he's talking about John. So we're talking about, you know, the more than half a century afterwards. And it's interesting how things change in half a century. Like, for instance, I think Penn and Teller, of all people, pointed out that Elvis had a favorite burger recipe, but nobody knows what it is, right? Like, and multiple burger recipes have come up with the people claiming that's his favorite cheeseburger, but nobody knows which one it is. And that's like in modern day, where we have, you know, printing press and, you know, like we have modern writing. Hell, we've got radio recordings in the time of Elvis, but we still don't know what recipe is the correct one, even though there's multiple ones. So 50 years in those times, you're really looking at a lot of information lost. You know, a lot of information lost. And so sort of 60 years or really I should say like 60 to 70 years or so after the purported death of Jesus, the death and resurrection, you had the first Jewish war, right? You had the first war where the Jewish people rose up against the Romans and actually like threw them out, right? It took, who was it? I think it was, I can't remember the person's name, but it's a Roman sort of like leader had to come back and retake the city. And that's when the second temple was destroyed, right? When he came back, he destroyed the second temple, probably because there was a prophecy that Jesus would come and sit on the throne in the second temple, you know, like, but yeah, I mean, the Jews literally threw the Romans out. So about this time, was there any kind of any reason why they may have made up this religion in order to, you know, consolidate people? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They wanted the Romans out of Judea. And I might add, they did get them out. It just didn't stick. Because the Romans had even if they lost a province, they would send somebody in. I don't remember. Hang on a second. Let me look it up. Who came back and yeah, so Titus came back and destroyed the second temple. Yeah.
Ooh, watch out for those Tituses, especially the Uranus kind.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's called the Great Jewish Revolt. So it's basically a war that started off by obviously the province of Judea, Galilee. All of these cities were conquered by the Romans. They were Roman provinces, which meant they were basically occupied. They wanted to overthrow the Roman conquerors and did so briefly, because they did send somebody back in with an army to retake it.
So in a way, Jesus did fulfill the prophecy to drive out the Romans. It just wasn't Jesus.
Well, no, it just wasn't Jesus. That no, Jesus did not drive out the Romans. You know, the Romans basically, I mean, they kept the city until or the province until the collapse of the Roman Empire. So, you know, there was times when they did sort of take back control, but it did not last. So, you know, this whole idea of Jesus defeating the evil empire of the Romans, that certainly didn't come true at all.
Weirdly, they might have had a better chance if they just fucking chilled for a little while, because, like, remember around that time in the 1st century, the Romans were kicking the crap out of the Germanic tribes because of the huge technological advantage. But over the following few centuries, trade and reverse engineering and other various things brought the Germanic tribes up to parity with Rome, which is why the Visigoths and Ostrogoths were able to sack Rome itself in the late 4th century. Like, the Romans couldn't stop them anymore.
Correct. Yes.
If the Jews had just hung around and instead of trying to drive off the Romans with pitchforks and shit, and they couldn't have known this was going to happen. It's not like a prophet showed up and told them what was going to happen in the future or whatever. But they would have benefited from the technological innovations, and similarly to the Germans weren't even Roman citizens, and the Jews were, right?
Yes.
They were part of the Eastern Empire. If they bided their time, they would have been handed the technology that they would need for a successful revolt later.
Yes. Well, and the thing is that you can make the argument that, because now Rome is definitely is overwhelmingly Christian kind of thing, and the Vatican sits in Rome with the Pope on there who is Christian kind of thing, and Eastern Orthodoxy. I mean, Constantine was basically the one that caused, like, you can sort of talk about that, but that wasn't really what the prophecy said about driving out the evil kind of thing. It was military. It was, the Messiah comes with a sword kind of thing. Like, it's not, it wasn't going to say, hey, well, we will conquer it by, basically having a Roman emperor nationalize our religion for the, empire kind of thing. That wasn't the prophecy. It really was a defeat of the empire, not a, hey, let's co-opt it for our own purposes kind of thing. And I think the Byzantine Empire is fascinating because it really was a case where you had a theocracy. And it was kind of really fascinating. The leader of the Byzantine Empire was also the bishop of Antioch. It was they were the spiritual leader as well, and I think it's really fascinating sort of how that came about from a Roman Eastern Roman Empire kind of thing. And it really comes down to one guy, Constantine, going, hey, I can use this. This is really useful for me. Like, I can, if I make the leader of this church and nationalize the church and use it with the political system, it becomes very powerful.
It's kind of what Theodosius did in his declaration of, I want to say Milan, but that's probably wrong. It's not my area of history. I just have bits and pieces. But Theodosius's idea was, what if we use this there's only one God business to unite all of the people across the Roman Empire under a single faith? Because if they all believe in the same religion, they'll all fight for the same emperor. And holy shit, was he wrong. But he tried it.
Yeah.
And then Rome was immediately sacked.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We see these theocracies kind of instituted with high moral ideals and stuff, and we look back on them now and sort of go, because, like, even though Byzantine was ostensibly a early Christian nation, like, it was a theocracy, kind of. I mean, it wasn't that the bishops. Well, it wasn't
because, like, so Constantine set up a separate hub for the eastern provinces, including a parliament. The Roman Senate was really unhappy about. But it was Theodosius who formally separated it into a completely different empire rather than just an administrative district. And so Theodosius had already made Christianity the exclusive religion of the Roman Empire. And then he separated, officially creating Byzantium as a distinct empire. So it was from its inception, a Christian theocracy.
Yeah, but I mean, it's
a state.
Well, it wasn't a theocracy in the way that, like, we look at I mean, Iran is a theocracy, right? Like, it fulfills all the criteria of theocracy, but it still does have elections and things like that because like, Iran's incredibly complicated the way that it's set up, because it does have, ultimately, the head of state is the main priest of the religion, right? The Ayatollah. But it still does have a president and all of these other, like, sort of levers of power that, you know, that you can elect. But so yes, Byzantine Empire was a theocracy, but the average sort of bishop, or the average bishop of these dioceses, they didn't have like as much power as you would expect. It is more the emperor that did have consolidated power, and that was the bishop of the Antiochian diocese. That is the emperor of Byzantine. So to be a theocracy, you don't just need, the priests are the ones in charge. That isn't entirely accurate. It is just that the absolute power rests in some kind of religious provision, right? So if the Ayatollah says something in Iran, nobody can go against him. Same as if the Byzantine Empire had a name for it. I can't remember the name that they had for it. I'm drawing a mental blank. I don't know why. But if they said something, then that was absolute power, basically. That was set in stone.
I don't know how it was in the 4th and 5th century, but the head of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is the descendant of the Byzantine wing of the faith, is the Patriarch of Constantinople, and he's not the same as the Pope, because the patriarchs of the various cities and temples and such consider themselves as more of a council. Like Constantinople only got special treatment because it had the ear of the emperor in Constantinople. Like, it wasn't because he was the Pope, it was he was just the closest.
It was Basilius, the Basilius. So that's later on, that's sort of Greek, and it is sort of later on, that's what it was called, but that's the word I was thinking of. But it's interesting because the Byzantine Empire, it wasn't this, what we would see as this morally solid, amazing country. Like, there was still slavery. Lots of it, right? There was still, injustices perpetrated by this empire on lands around them. They still attacked people. It wasn't this, well, if Christians get into power, suddenly it's all lovey-dovey, fuzzy stuff, and, we're all living in some utopia, because they've been in power before. And none of it turns into this high moral standard that Christians would lead you to expect. It turns into, hey, these guys have the power and they're doing whatever they want to do, just like any emperor or dictator would.
Yeah. They're just saying, well, I have the authority because God.
Yeah.
No, you can't ask God. I speak for him. So when I say that he gives me the authority, you just have to go with it.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
Because, like,
there was sort of mutilations was a general punishment that they handed out. Like, they would blind people as punishment for certain crimes, kind of thing. Like, that was a general thing that they did. If you spoke ill of the emperor, if you stole something, they may blind you. I mean, imagine, not only is that, like, really horrific to do to somebody to start off with, like, how do you, if you find out, hey, that person made up that you stole something, how do you correct that? How do you compensate? You can't, right? Like, it's just a arbitrary punishment that you cannot alleviate, you cannot remedy after the fact. It's also that now you have a person on the street who, can't work or do anything really productive. It's a horrible punishment. Christianity, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, it's it's unfortunate, I suppose, that first of all, that Jesus didn't actually say anything about the social issues that mattered, like slavery or the way women were treated. Heaven forbid he issue new commandments on those or something, then no one would follow him, miraculously enough. But he also could have proposed a prophecy saying that his religion wouldn't drive out Rome, but one day would rule Rome. And if he had, and that had still come to pass, that would have been a bit more rhetorically useful for those who came after him. But I mean, he didn't think anything would last more than a generation anyway, so what would he care?
John 21, the chapter in which that appears, was written some years after that.
Right. So hey, we're not going down the road. I got my own path of heading down here, right? You're fine. You're fine. Now, the Acts of Peter. Now, my point about apocryphal gospels, I do not believe that everything in an apocryphal gospel needs to be taken is just false. I think that's bad historiography to say, okay, everything that is in a gospel is historical bedrock, and everything that is not in a gospel is just totally false. We have to sift through the different evidences here. My point with the Gospel of Peter was that there appears to be an apologetic.
I love how he's like trying to pry open a door for extra layers of special pleading. I mean, technically true, like the story of the Odyssey and the Iliad. For a long time, people assumed because it was an epic poem that involved gods and mermaids and whatnot, it was entirely myth. But then we found the ruins of the city of Troy, and we were like, oh shit, there's at least some history here. So just because a thing is clearly mythology doesn't mean all of it is fictional.
Right. Or everything mentioned is it. I think Matt Delahunty uses the case of Spider-Man. If someone found a Spider-Man comic, they're like, well, obviously this is made up. People can't do this, and it's obviously just a story. But New York exists, and it's set in New York. Like, there's pictures of Spider-Man's favorite building to sit on is the Chrysler Building. That exists, right? The Chrysler Building is a thing that exists. You can go and visit it. It doesn't mean the entire story is true.
Yeah. I've seen, I mean, I haven't been in the building, but I've seen the building. I haven't even been in the Empire State Building. I am a terrible New Yorker.
Motif contradicting what we know and putting the large, like the crowds and the Jewish priests and all the Romans, everyone there present at the tomb. More the angelic element. It's not even just the presence of angels. They emerge from the tomb and they're very, very large. And Jesus himself emerges from the tomb. And he's very, very big. He's like a giant.
He's got a walking, talking cross behind him as well, which is quite surprising.
Actually, we're not entirely.
The talking cross.
The talking cross, yeah.
Thanks, moderator, for that helpfully amusing bit. Because it's like, there's so many absurdities in these fucking stories.
Yep.
We keep forgetting some of the most outrageous ones. We forget to mention them. It's just, clearly no one takes that seriously. And yet, it's in the damn book.
Yeah, so scholars they think that might be a mistranslation, right? Like, it may be one bearing a cross rather than a talking cross. But, this is the point. We don't know what the author meant because it is, we're relying on copies of translations of copies of we're relying on such a weak chain of evidence. That's the thing. And I think it's interesting the way that he's like, oh, well, we don't have to take all of these gospels as exactly written kind of thing. It's like, then how do you say that they are reliable at all? Like, if you want to say, hey, maybe some of this is badly interpreted, maybe some of it's been badly translated, apparently that's, according to scholars, that's where the whole Virgin Mary may have come from. She wasn't a virgin. It's just that the people in the New Testament read the prophecy in the old one and mistranslated the word into virgin, when actually it should be translated as a young woman, just a young unmarried woman. Doesn't have to be a virgin.
Yeah.
But then the story arises that, oh, she's a virgin, like it was prophesied that it would be, and you're like, why? It was never prophesied that she would be a virgin, ever.
Yeah. This is the thing our historian friends are constantly warning us about, is putting our modern day conceptions into these ancient texts, because that's exactly what happened for the writers of the New Testament, is they were putting their present day conceptions when they were reading the even more ancient texts. They saw the word Alma, which means young woman, and to them, an unmarried woman must be a virgin. They're synonymous terms, and so they decided, oh, well, clearly that's what they meant too, and so they made her a virgin in the story. I mean, people today still do the same thing, right? Like there's documentarians and journalists who will say something like, you know, Bob Smith had children with Karen Wolf, and so clearly they were married. Well, what makes you think they were married? Well, they had children. That's the only way to have children, is if you're married.
Right.
I have news for you, Bestie. That's not the only way.
And it also, like, another one that sort of makes me very makes me dubious of the whole thing is the idea that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, because those ancient prophecies in Isaiah, in you know, all of these ancient Jewish texts had the Messiah being born in Bethlehem, because that is a very significant place in the Jewish faith. It's where the angels met with it was where Abraham was buried. It's where all of his family was buried in Canaan lands. Basically, it is the ancestral place. But Jesus definitely came from Nazareth. So how do you get somebody that everybody knows was born in Nazareth or came from Nazareth back to Bethlehem? Well, you say, hey, there was a census and people had to travel back to the place where they were born in order to be counted for a census. And that's what the story says in the Bible. They were traveling back to where Joseph was born to do the census. Now, the problem is that no census works like this, and especially not the Roman census, because they basically, what you're trying to do and what the Romans were trying to do is figure out how many people were living at places, what their occupation was, so they could distribute resources around to the society. It's why we do censuses now. It's so we know what kind of resources we're going to need at certain places. So if you understand that, traveling back to where you were born is just a highly inaccurate census. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It is literally antithetical to what the Romans are trying to achieve. And we know that they did censuses and they never required anyone to travel back to where they were born, because it would have undermined the very purpose of what they were trying to do. And that is probably one of the reasons why the Roman Empire lasted so long, because they were very organized. And you know, imagine if somebody originally came out to the provinces in Judea from Rome. Would they have to travel all the way back to Rome? Would you have to, if you were somebody that came from, you know, Western Gaul, would you have to travel all the way back? It's ridiculous. But it is, to me, it is solving a problem of, well, the prophecies say he comes from Bethlehem. You've got this guy here claiming to fulfill the prophecies. How do we get him to come from Bethlehem?
Yeah, and not only do you have, okay, so there's a couple of different things. The first is the census itself. The Romans were very good record keepers. That's part of that organization thing. And the nearest census to the time of Jesus's birth was in the year 6. But that's a problem, because the gospel stories also tell us of Jesus's birth before the death of Herod the Great, which was in 4 BCE, 10 years earlier. So if Jesus was born while Herod was still alive, he was not born when the nearest real census actually happened. There's a 10-year gap, and that's a bit of a problem. But the second thing is there's another one of those translation issues. because unfortunately we don't have the originals of the manuscript, so we can't say for sure, but the consensus of scholars seems to, by scholars, I mean the people who aren't contractually obligated to say the Bible is infallible,
right,
the non-bound scholars, is that Jesus was documented as Jesus the Nazarene, and someone read it as the Nazarite, which is a different thing. A Nazarene follows a certain code. A Nazarite would be a person from Nazareth. And the person, ostensibly a Greek, writing this down didn't know that distinction.
Right.
And so they had to invent the story of getting him to Bethlehem. Because they mistranslated something.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that the story says he was from Nazareth. That is not, like, don't get me wrong, if that very well could be a mistranslation, but the in Greek the story says he was from Nazareth.
Right.
So if you're sort of doing an internal critique, you're like, well, why is he from Nazareth? But apparently he was born in Bethlehem, and it is the most ridiculous thing to say they had to return to the place of their parents' birth to do a census. That is insane. That is just insane.
Yeah, it's multiple layers of silly, but it also demonstrates that when these mythologies were created, it was far enough in the future from the event that people's memories were at least fuzzy about when the census actually was.
Yeah, because all of these stories, I mean, they're not Paul. They're later on in Mark, and they're like 70 years afterwards. Like, this is the thing. Like, it's not like, oh, you remember that census that was like a couple of years ago. No, 70 years. Like, if you participated in a census 70 years later, would you remember the exact year that was in? I wouldn't. I mean, not offhand,
I would, but it's because in the US we do our censuses every 10 years.
Yeah, but
so it's just always every 10 years.
Okay, that's fair. If I look, we probably do ours on a certain date, a certain periodical, but I don't know what that is. And it does remind me that we do have an Australian census coming up. So if you are Australian and you do not follow a formal religion, please put none in. If you don't go to church, if you don't follow a religion, don't feel like you have to in order to be culturally relevant. Because there has been this push by churches to go, hey, are you a lapsed Catholic, a lapsed Protestant? Just put your religion down just because. Just because. Mm-hmm. Just because, it helps society. And there is no reason to do that. It gives more resources to churches that aren't actually doing things for society. I think that it is better to be honest in the census and say, hey, I don't follow any formal religion. It doesn't mean you don't have any beliefs. It doesn't mean you don't believe in a God. It just means you're not part of that religion, because the government will give resources to denominations and churches based upon how many people are saying, hey, yes, I'm part of this church. They will support the churches or give them certain leeways or do certain things for them. So be honest. If you're not part of a religion anymore, just say no religion. That's fine. Doesn't mean you're atheist. It doesn't mean you're agnostic. It doesn't mean anything. It just means you're not part of a formal religion. And I think it's important, because we've had a lot of advertising sort of going, not sure what you are, put Christian.
Yeah,
that's not right.
That's shady as hell. Like, it's so scammy. I hate it.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's okay. I
would love to see a future where people are just none. Like, it wasn't even atheist or agnostic. It was like, that's a silly question. That's like asking which Greek god I follow. None.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just in terms of, are you part of an organized religious system, you know. So do you attend church? Do you go to, because I mean, like when you're talking about religion, it really is a sort of a institution that has a system of worship or adoration kind of thing. It does come with these expectations that people do not necessarily, like, people can believe in a God, but they're not necessarily part of any church. They're not part of any religion. And hey, that's okay. I you know, I'm not hassling them for that. I'm not hassling them for being part of a church. It's just, you know, the fall away from people who are part of these churches, especially when they see, you know, the harms that the Catholic Church has done, for instance. Catholics used to be a majority of this country, solidly majority of this country. But I think people are realizing that they cannot support the Catholic Church with everything that it has done over the last, you know, couple of decades kind of thing, or even later. You know, the priests doing horrible things, the way that they treated people in Africa, the horrendous consolidation of wealth around the Vatican. I think that people are sort of realizing, hey, I don't want to be a part of this. And so there's no reason, sort of because your parents are Catholic, of going, oh, well, I'm Catholic too. You don't have to do that.
It's not genetic, actually.
It's not. Which is always weird when people are like, oh, you know, atheists, they're not having as much children, so the Christians are going to overtake them. And it's like, if that was the only way to make an atheist is by having, you know, reproducing, I would agree with you. But that's not the only way atheists come about. Like, they deconvert from religions. It's wild that they think that, oh, you know, the only way that atheists are going to make more atheists is by reproduction.
In fact, you'd think an honest apologist would want there to be more atheists, because there's other religions, right? And as a Christian fighting for a Christian nation, or whatever the hell they say, it would be better to have a country with Christians and atheists rather than a country full of all these competing religions trying. If it's just atheists, then the Christians only have to deal with non-belief. They don't have to try to convince people who are Muslim that Christianity is a better idea than Islam, because when you put the ideas head to head, it's really hard to pick a winner because they're both pretty bad.
Well, I'm not sure that's entirely true, because they seem to hate atheists more than they do Muslims or Buddhists or any of these other religions. Like, I don't. But I think it's situational. I think it's because I would submit that it's actually easier to convert somebody who already believes in a God, saying that, hey, ours is actually the right one, than somebody that is like, yeah, you've got to show the God first. You know, if they're already at the God stage, it's easier to get them to your God than somebody who doesn't even believe there is a God. So I think it's sort of pragmatically, they're like, well, I can't deal with these atheists because I'm going to have to actually come up with some evidence for my beliefs. Whereas a Muslim or a Buddhist or somebody else, they can just go, yeah, you're right about the God, just wrong about which one.
Yeah, I can see how it'd be easier to persuade somebody who's already got their critical thinking disabled like that. But as far as the dislike of atheists, it seems performative to me that it's useful for people like Mark Driscoll and Frank Turek to it seem like the great battle is between Christian and atheist, because it paints the picture that that's all there is. All the other religions are irrelevant.
Right. And I think they sort of go, well, they're you know, I don't know. And I think the cynical part of me, I guess, sort of says, I think that they really don't like us because we've got better arguments than the Muslims or the, you know, the other religious people.
It's true. We can not only present our own position, but can pick theirs apart. Like, We don't have to argue sperm comes from the backbone and the mountains are placed on pegs.
Yep. But it's weird, this argument, like, what are you going to do against the Muslims? Same thing we've been doing against you. We're going to use rationality and reason to basically pick apart their religion and see whether it has got justification and is sound, rational way of carrying out my life in the world. Exactly the same thing.
And to be clear, in practice with chill people who aren't fundamentalists and whatnot, Christians are fine, but Muslims tend to be a little bit more friendly, like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. Honestly, if I had to pick a religion to be my favorite out of the main ones that are practiced these days, I kind of like the Sikhs because of, there's a few different factors, but one of the big ones is the perception of life as a gift where we owe it to each other to make the world better out of gratitude for the gift we've received.
Yeah, I think Jainism would be the one that I'd point to, of sort of, do not harm anything kind of thing. Very, very nice sentiment. I think sometimes impractical, but still it's a nice sentiment. It's a good sentiment.
Yeah, there's a few good ones in various things. But say la vie. I'm people come here for the tangents.
Sure, Mark Goodacre has made some arguments that the Latin or the original language may refer to not the cross, but the crucified one.
Okay.
So that's a little sticky wicket there. We have to. So I mean, as I said once before, I'm always trying to dig down deep to make sure I got all my ducks in a row here. But I think that's very different from when I look at the angels that go, but it's not even angels. And Mark is just a young man who's described who is assumed to be an angel. So it's a very sober account. But even if there are angels that are present, they're here. They inform the women about this. But even the guards themselves, some might say, well, that was an apologetic motif that was invented that still shows an explanation that the tomb was empty. I'm not prepared to throw that out. If you made up the guard story, you would have put the guards there on Friday, not Saturday, because the body still could have been stolen. And there were. It could have been related to an event that happened about 16 years.
Okay, so Alex isn't talking about necessarily the guards there. He's talking about the conversation between the Sanhedrin and the guards that none of the apostles would have been privy to, that said, oh, let us station guards because there is a rumor going around that the body was stolen by the followers of Jesus. Right? Like, it is this rumor that the Sanhedrin are talking about. But the problem is that the author, I think this one is in Matthew, the author is talking about this conversation like they heard it. Like they're saying, hey, this is what the Sanhedrin said to the guards kind of thing, while we don't know where that came from. Like, we have no idea. No idea.
Yeah, it's so weird that I have an idea why he's trying to focus in that direction. It's a deflection from the fact that he's saying if the story were made up, then it'd be on Friday. But here's the problem. He just asserted a little while ago that the Bible, that the gospel stories are true. And yet that's a contradiction between Mark and Matthew. And so if he focuses on, well, it couldn't be made up because of this irrelevant detail, he's dodging the point that the other story, which is also just as true according to him, doesn't even have them at all. At least that's the attempt, I think. I don't know. It's silly. What's not silly is Lil of all trades sending us a super chat for $2. Thank you so much, Lil, saying, all hail the Empress and Mark. And Lil's got her own emoji, which it doesn't show on our interface here, but it is there, and you can see it in live chat if you're here in live chat. And if you're not here in live chat, what are you doing with your life? Hit the subscribe button and join us next time. Thank you, Lil. And Human Tommy, member for 5 months. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And yeah, members get member chats. That's a thing too. Yeah. In fact, I haven't been doing this in a while, but I can hit a button and make there be more members. Speaking,
haven't you done it this month? That's really late.
I had
That's
not,
something
no.
I would do. That's absolutely something I would do.
I honestly, I haven't been paying that much attention to it because my health has been troublesome, and it's like not even on my radar for concerns. But you know, we're doing all right today. So Lil, member for 11 months. Woo! Aunt Jur, member for 16 months. Yee! All kinds of goodies. Thank y'all so much. And gift emberships. Let's see, those went to Jason Morlock. My screen is very terrible. My apologies. Bryce Viking, The Problem. I'm so sorry. I can't even read the next one. It looks like it says me official. And
me official. Yes.
And Luke Riley. Congratulations.
It's official. That's fine.
Yeah, it's a great name. But enjoy all the fun custom emojis. We have a shit ton of them. Do enjoy and all the other perks, like members get.
I gotta love the username. I gotta love the username. The Problem. That is embracing yourself. Like absolutely.
Absolutely.
Love it. Sorry, Amber. Go ahead. Go ahead. I shouldn't have interrupted your spiel. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. There's a bunch of other goodies for members too, not just emojis. There's exclusive content, a whole bunch of videos that are members only. When I can, I do a members only live stream, which are fun when we can have them. And when I get normal recorded produced videos, members get to see those first. Also patrons, so consider patreon.com if you're interested in that sort of thing. I'm working on one now. It's very slow going, but I'm hoping to have it available for members before I go to Nashville. I can't promise it, but I'm trying. And Noise Ending, member for 3 months, says hamburger.
I think Noise was asking why he capitalized the hamburger, and so I think the hamburger is named after Hamburg, but it never actually came from Hamburg. Like the Frankfurter came from Frankfurt, or Champagne came from Champagne.
Yeah. I mean, well, the thing about hamburger, I guess, is there's a lot of people named Hamburg because they came from Hamburg, but they live in other areas. Like, for example, Christine Jorgensen's doctor was named Dr. Hamburger, even though he was in Denmark. So when people talk about the Hamburger Files, they're talking about a sexology clinic, which it invites all kinds of questions.
Well, at least it ain't tacos. At least sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said that. Just ignore me. Ignore me. I'm terrible. Woof.
Yeah, history is weird. But the reason I mention it is because it could be that the hamburger was invented by a person from Hamburg who has that surname, rather than in the city of Hamburg. Or it could be I don't know. I'm just asking questions, as they say. Yes, Aunt Jur, I love to play with my boobie. It's so soft, and I just it's I tell you, folks, if you've never tried it, I love having boobies. I know somebody's gonna clip that, so I'll just leave that there.
Before the resurrection, there was a slave named Clemens who he was a slave to Agrippa Postumus. He was the grandson of Caesar Augustus, and he stole the bones of his murdered master to claim that his master survived, and he impersonated him to say, "Yeah, I'm him," to try to like because he bore a likeness to him to try to, continue on his legacy to impersonate him. And because that's one of the big reasons, like, why would there be guards? How did Herod know more? How did Pilate know more than like the apostles did? I think there could have been a concern about that during Passover, and Pilate doesn't want any riots during Passover. He's dealt with that before. Enough of this nonsense. So I'm not prepared to throw out the charge.
Seriously, we're wildly speculating here. Like, so, one of them dressed up as a guard to overhear. Like, seriously? Like, as opposed, like, so somebody dressed up as a guard to overhear this conversation of the Sanhedrin. That's what you're postulating based upon absolutely nothing, where the other thing is that someone just made it up to fill a hole that was left by Mark originally that needed to be covered up by the time it got to Matthew. Really?
And in a way, he's kind of proving that hypothesis, because he's just speculating. Well, it could have been. And then the next person says, well, Trent says this is a possibility. And the next person says, well, I heard this is the case. And the next person says this is the case. Like, that's exactly how that happens, is one person just starts speculating and making shit up.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I mean, you could insert all kinds of wild speculations into here, but if you're looking for a Occam's razor, so Occam's razor is this principle of, if you're looking for a solution to a problem, or if you're looking for an explanation to something, don't multiply entities. So it's basically like the most it kind of is a abductive kind of argument. It's a most likely scenario. So it's not like, oh, because this is the simplest explanation, it's definitely the one that happened. No, it's usually that the simplest explanation that accounts for all facts is the one to basically, it is the most probable, right? Like, so what you're doing is you're adding guards, adding, these hijinks of the guards getting dressed, or people getting dressed up as guards in order to like, why are we multiplying entities like this? Why not just go for, well, if there is a passage in the Bible of something the authors couldn't possibly have known, like, could it just be made up? But you won't acknowledge that possibility, right? But that is the most, as far as Occam's razor go, that is the most likely explanation, that the conversation between the Sanhedrin and the guards just didn't happen, and it was inserted. That doesn't mean that the events didn't happen. That doesn't mean that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. But what it means is that the most likely explanation for that being in Matthew, when it wasn't in the earlier ones, is that someone added it. And it never happened. That conversation never happened.
Plugging those plot holes. And speaking of plugging things,
woo!
Tommy has sent us 10 jewels that comes with a happy poop. Apparently that's a thing now. Now, for anybody who's not familiar, if you're watching video on mobile, YouTube gives you the ability to send jewels, which are sort of like super stickers. They're just little graphics that show up, but it only
they are just copying Twitch, aren't they? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so jewels are a thing now. They have been for a while, but now we can see them.
Mm-hmm.
So as I understand it, I'm very poor, so I haven't bought any myself. But as I understand it, YouTube provides every account with 1,000 to use as a starter to see how they work. And then if you like them, then you can buy more. You prepay for a jewel pack, and then you use the jewels in different increments. There's some things for 2 jewels. There's some things for 1,000 jewels. But you can send them in whatever amount you like in order to, like, basically do a super sticker kind of thing, as I understand it. But now we can see them. So thank you, Tommy. More happy poop. That is happy a second poop. One. That's
Thanks, Tommy.
Lil sends us 250 jewels of a laughing disco, whatever that means. and 30 more for a flower. Yay, flowers! We have caused havoc, but it's all good. I don't mind. Chaos and shenaniganery, I suppose. I should change my channel name. Hey, if I change my channel name to Alma, does that make me a virgin? Because that's what the word means, apparently.
Oh, look, I would never pry into a lady's, virginity or not. I don't think it's any of my business, to be honest with you. But I do think it's much more likely, as Christopher Hitchens said, it's much more likely, it's much more unlikely that a ancient Mesopotamian weather god, miraculously impregnated a young woman in Palestine than she just got knocked up by somebody.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. There's a certain number of people running around who, for some reason, have a big problem with the fact I have kids. And so if I changed my channel name to indicate virginity, it'd just be funny as hell. Because then they'd either have to agree with me or they'd have to concede that I have kids. And I don't know why this is so controversial, but here we are.
Here we are.
I don't think it shows a myth making in that regard. But I do think that if you're making up something, the apologetic motif is put everybody there so you've got really good evidence. But like in Mark and the other Gospels agree with this, the first witnesses
like 500? You mean like the 500? You mean like the 500 where you're basically saying, hey, there were 500 people I talked to that witnessed us. Trust me, bro. You mean that like that 500 people that you put in the story, Trent? That 500, that incredibly round number.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have here a list of names. Actually, there are actually names on this. I'll be damned. But I'm referencing McCarthy, just pieces of paper and saying, I have names and therefore, but Paul didn't even give us names. He just said there are 500 people. He could have made up names. It would have been slightly more believable.
Well, I mean, the problem with making up names is that people might have gone looking for them and found that they didn't exist. It's much easier to say, hey, like Fox News does it all the time. Some people have said is one of their favorite places. People have been saying, because then you can't go and check who these people are and whether, in fact, they did actually say that.
Yeah. Which people? My favorite trick is when the morning show hosts will just make up something wacky, and then the news hosts in the afternoon will repeat what they said with that added on qualifier. Some people are saying the wacky thing when it was their morning host who said the wacky thing.
Testimony in the ancient world is incredibly low value. It's basically below a criminal's, which I think speaks to the fact that it's historical. Even more so the idea that you have Mark and Luke describing this. If you were going to make up the whole gospel accounts, pick Peter, Paul, Philip, pick somebody more notable. I see a lot of signs that point towards a sober.
Well, that's nonsense too, because it goes to verifiability again, right? If you pick someone who is well known, then people can pick it apart. But if you pick you wouldn't know Mark, he goes to another school. He was just the interpreter for Peter,
Yeah, and Luke is sort of a scribe that sort of wrote this stuff down, but Luke wasn't really notable in the Gospels as doing anything.
Yeah, because he's very much after the fact eyewitness testimony, though. Oh goodness. Beat Me Up Bob sends us 10 joules for a gold coin. This may be the first time I've ever gotten a gold coin on the internet.
Wow.
Despite my occasional attempts to wander into Reddit.
Why would you ever do that?
Thank you. And also a flower. And also another gold coin. Yay. We're getting treasure today, folks. A vast. Shiver me timbers. Thank you, Bob.
Well, the human Tommy makes a good point. The women didn't tell people about seeing Jesus in court. So the women in the gospel stories are like, it's very, very strange because the first gospel sort of said the women saw this thing and then they ran away and told nobody because they're afraid. And that's where it ends. That's it. You know, like, they just ran away and didn't tell anybody. Yet later on, they went and got the disciples and brought them back, kind of thing. And they're telling a lot of people. So that is definitely a contradiction. And there's a lot of apologetics around it. Like, oh, it meant just for that second kind of thing. It just meant, oh, they didn't tell anybody there and then they went away. But that's not what the story kind of says. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh goodness, the excuses, the made up extras. These stories are reliable. They're not made of made up extras. Let me explain with made up extras. Infallible and clear. God is not the author of confusion, folks. It's the humans that do that part.
Yeah.
Historical account of just describing things as they happened.
Alex, I saw you perk up when Trent mentioned the women witnesses argument. Did you have anything to say to that?
So much. I'm actually surprised to hear this come up. I know that this is a common sort of apologetical motif, but to me, it's clear as day. You know, women discover the empty tomb, which means that, you know, it must be true because women's testimony wasn't worth that much, and so why would it be invented? There are a few things to say here. Firstly, who knew where the tomb was? The women were told that the disciples had fled at the crucifixion.
Could they have
of
brought
Jesus.
men along with them?
Well, we'll get to that. I mean, maybe they could have done, but we know that they weren't. We know that they weren't at the crucifixion, and we know that that they'd fled. And so, in keeping with the theme of the disciples fleeing, afraid, and their cowardice, they wouldn't even know where Jesus was buried. Of course, it's going to be the women who like, it's like a narrative.
Yeah.
If the story said that Peter went to the tomb, the question would be, well, how did he find out? Well, Peter does eventually go to the tomb. Why is that? Because yes, women discover the empty tomb. They have no idea what's happened. And what's the first thing that they go and do? They go and get the men to come and verify it for us. Right? They run to the men and they say, "Oh, we don't know what's happened." They're these, you know, as the
Well, no, that's not what Mark says.
The
earliest gospel of Mark, that's the earliest part we can find this recorded, was that at sort of Mark 16, and remember me talking about the long ending of Mark. So at Mark 16:8, it says the women ran and did not tell anyone because they're afraid. They're afraid, they ran and did not tell anyone. And that is where our earliest copies end. Mark 9-20 is the stuff that came later, right? Like, it's the stuff that was added. And, you know, the handling of snakes and all that stuff that does not fit in with the rest of the passage. So, you know, it kind of is this really weird kind of narrative where it just is a couple of lines that the women found the tomb empty and they ran away because they're afraid and did not tell anyone. That's it.
Yep. Tell no one.
Can I share my screen and just show what I'm talking about?
Sure.
Yeah, so this is NIV because I usually find that is totally fine. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to remember how to do this on StreamYard.
Buttons. There we go.
Yeah. So when they saw the stone literally large, they entered the tomb. They saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side. They're alarmed. Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He is written, he is not here. See the place where they have laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Trembling, bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Now, you'll notice that the earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have verses 9-20. This is a disclaimer in it. Hey, this is bullshit. It was added later. And that is the scholarly consensus. You know, when Jesus rose early on the first day, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, of whom he had driven out 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him, who were mourning and weeping. When they heard that Jesus was alive and they seen him, they did not believe it. So it goes into all of this stuff, which wasn't originally in there, right? But they realized there's a problem with this ending and the women telling no one, right? But in the later ones, they have the women immediately going and telling all of the disciples. Even if you add in the interpolation, the added section in here, they still don't immediately go and tell the disciples. They appear first to Mary Magdalene early on the first day of the week. As you can imagine, it was Friday and then Sunday, rose, and then later on in the week. Like, it's not immediately, right?
Yar.
And this is, and just for funsies, this is the one where it does say, where is it? There we go. That go into the world, whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. Kind of immoral, by my opinion, but never mind. And those signs will accompany those who believe. In my name, they will drive out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes with their hands. And when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people and they will get well. Now, tell me, honestly, as a Christian, do you think this is accurate? That you will handle snakes, that if you drink deadly poison, you're just not going to be affected. And please do not test that out. It has been tested. It doesn't work. Okay. Do you think that if somebody has a broken leg, you're going to place your hand on them? If somebody's got some kind of disease, you're just going to place their hand on sick people and you will get well? And if it doesn't work for you, are you really a Christian? Right? Because those signs should accompany someone that believes if this passage is right. But instead, what we know is this was added later.
Because whenever it does fail, they just go, oh, well, that person's just not actually a Christian. They thought they were, but apparently they were mistaken. Because the gospel can't possibly be wrong about that. But even without that added section, or rather, when there was just the added section, that immediately invites the question, well, if they told no one, where did the story come from then?
Well, yeah, and sort of, so as it says in the footnotes, there is some manuscripts that said just after verse 8, so verse 9 has, then they quickly reported all of these instructions to those around Peter. After this, Jesus himself also sent out through east to west the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. Amen.
See, now that would be a better ending if you're going to interpolate one.
That's not the ending that we have from the earliest manuscripts. That seems to be added as well. So you have this case where the manuscript is produced. There is a massive problem here with the later manuscripts, right? From we're talking this as Mark is about 40 years after the alleged events of the resurrection. The other ones are coming out about 60, 70 AD, so 20, 30 years later, and they've gone, oh, that's a problem. That is the most feasible explanation to why this suddenly appeared in all of these manuscripts. That it is a problem that in this story, the women found an empty tomb, didn't tell anybody about it. Because in the other ones, they immediately go get the apostles, get the disciples, bring them back, show them the empty tomb, have somebody there. None of that in the earliest work. Just want to really hammer that home. Thanks, Ember. I really thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. It's shit like this. That's why the Muslims run around saying that the New Testament has been corrupted, because it has been. People have been tampering for hundreds of years.
The early Christian critic Celsus says they're these hysterical women, and they don't know what they've seen, and they run to the disciples, and it's the disciples who come and verify it for them. So I mean, it's an instant verification, right? But, like, in other words, if this were some apologetical motif, yeah, it might be that's why they have them go and check.
But does that apply better to Matthew, Luke, and John than to that original kernel of the account in Mark?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
There's another reason that Bart Ehrman says, and it's because if you have, like, the women in that society were the ones that did the burial rites, anointed the oils, and took care of the body, basically, who did the mourning rituals on the body. So who would have been going into the tomb to do things with the body? It would have been the women. It wouldn't have been anybody else, because the women were the ones that did that. So they would have been the one. Like, you can't say, oh, well, the disciples went to check on the body. Why were the disciples checking on the body? That was the women's job.
They had I mean, according to every version of the story, they were very surprised to hear that Jesus was not in his tomb. So why would they go check? They had no expectation he wouldn't just be dead in there.
Right. But it is much more likely or much more satisfactory for the culture at the time to say, hey, the women were going to do the after burial rites on the body and they found no body. It makes a lot more sense if you understand society at the time. It would be saying, hey, this CEO of a company was looking through the trash out on the street and found this piece of evidence. Why was as opposed to, hey, a trash man, like a garbage collector, was looking through the trash and found this thing? You would automatically go, well, why was the CEO down there?
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
Yeah, and by the same token, an apologist like Trent comes along and goes, well, why was the trash man handling the trash? His testimony's not worth much in court.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you mean, bestie? We're not talking about court.
But like another thing to point out is that, like, this might be a bit of a silly thing to say, but people often just sort of assume that ancient writers are stupider than we are. Like, we sometimes think, and by the way, I'm not saying that this is made up, but I'm saying if you want to argue that it's not, and you say, well, you know, they wouldn't do this, like, because isn't it so realistic that they'd have this feature? Doesn't it make it all that more believable? Do you think ancient authors would have been clever enough to think of that themselves as well? You know, like, it just seems to me, in other words, that, like, the reasons that we have for thinking that it might be historical are things which could have occurred to somebody who was trying to come up with it. But I think it's clear as day that it would be the women who would discover the empty tomb, because they're the ones who knew where it was. They were the ones who were following Jesus throughout his passion. They were the ones who saw where he was buried. And then, as I say, the first thing they go and do is grab some men to go and verify it for them. So I don't know if this is as sort of feminist a story.
And I suppose the sort of social function of women in the ancient world in association with mourning. I wondered what you...
I was also going to say, like, you know, who's anointing the bodies? Although, of course, in John's gospel, it's Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea who sort of bring these oils and investments to the body. But by the way, what's the first thing that Mary Magdalene thinks when she sees the empty tomb? She doesn't think, oh gosh, remember when Jesus predicted that he was going to rise from the dead? That must be what's happened. They say, she says, they've taken the Lord and we do not know where they've put him. Her first assumption is that the body has been taken. And not only that, but she says this in John's gospel after running back to the disciples, when in Luke's gospel we're told that on the way back from the tomb, Jesus appears to her himself. If Jesus has just appeared to her and told her to go and tell the disciples, it'd be really weird for her to go to the disciples and say, they've taken the Lord and we do not know where they've put him. That point at which in Luke's gospel, Jesus says, touch my feet, you know, like, it has all these sort of extra physicality bits. Look, I think it's also...
It's weird. It's very, very strange because... like, the moderator seems to be on Alex's side. I don't know if maybe, because I know it's a Christian channel, right? It's unbelievable that it's, you know, on. So I don't know whether maybe he's compensating for being a Christian and trying to, you know, but he's giving some good points. I got to say, the moderator's kicking Trent's ass. It's wow. I don't think... Look, as somebody that does moderation, I don't think he should be doing this. I think he should be, like, letting them bring up their own points. I don't think, like, I realize it's a bit more conversational, but I think that if Trent said, hey, the moderator seemed to be on Alex's side, I'd be like, I would agree with that. I would actually agree with that. He raised a point that had not been raised by either of them, that it was the function of the women to do the anointing of the oil. Like, why is the moderator getting involved?
He's very excited by the topic, I guess.
Maybe. I think Alex is doing fine on his own.
We're having a friendly conversation. He's inserted himself because he's sitting there at the table, not really having to moderate, so why not? But he could also be, like, trying to steer Alex in a certain direction, because it seemed like Alex was about to make the case that we know it's fictional, because why does the story take place in the way that it does? Why doesn't Jesus just appear to the disciples instead of telling Mary, go tell them? He can just show up, which he does later in 3 of the stories, you know?
Yeah, so but that's weird in and of itself. because he appears in Galilee and he appears in a locked room in Jerusalem at the same time, which is odd to say the least. So even that has problems when you start to talk about his appearances to people, and the fact that nobody recognizes him as he doesn't look like Jesus.
Yeah, well, he regenerates like Doctor Who, but also that bilocation thing, that set an interesting precedent for the church, because there were in Catholic tradition, I believe, and I'm not Catholic, so I may get this wrong, but as I understand it, the early church fathers were all present for the Assumption of Mary when she didn't die and was ascended bodily into heaven.
Right.
By the magic of bilocation. They were both where they were and with Mary, I guess in Jerusalem, maybe Bethlehem, wherever the fuck she was, at the same time. Like,
wow, yeah.
See, the thing of it is, because this is another one of those things that people made shit up, and when a contradiction came to pass, instead of saying, oh, you're right, one of these versions must be wrong, they went, oh, well, let me just make some shit up to explain the made up shit. Because the first layer of made up shit was that these people who were known to be in other places like Alexandria or Rome or Antioch or whatever, people start saying, well, they were there for the Assumption of Mary. So that they were eyewitnesses, right? It definitely happened because there were eyewitnesses, these trusted disciples and apostles and things. And people would say, well, but they were in these other cities on that day. What do you mean? Well, Jesus was in two places at once in the stories, so why couldn't they be in two places at once? They were just the fact they were bilocating, because the story has to be true. So the fact that they were bilocating demonstrates they have the true magical miracle power stuff, which further confirms that this Christian story is true, actually. Yes. It's just bullshit all the way down. And I find it very funny. Alas, on the happier side, Left-Handed Jedi, member for 31 months, who has a very cool runic-looking logo thing going on. I can't, my screen is awful. I can't make it out, but it looks neat from what I can see. So thank you for that.
And be, they have libraries with knowledge in the Star Wars universe that is a blue sort of thing. It might be alluding to that. Like I can't remember what they're called. They're hologram kind of stuff that they keep knowledge on.
Neat. I want a hologram nifty looking thing. You know what? That leads me on a whole other tangent. I invented a 3-dimensional device, right? Like it's
holocron. Thank you, Jedi. Thank you. Holocrons. Is it a holocron?
It could be a holocron. It could be. Anyway, Jedi sends a super chat for $2. Thank you so much, Jedi, and says, wait, Jesus is big. Jesus is bigger on the inside? He might be.
Yeah. Jesus' bag of holding confirmed.
It's true. It's true. And Mark, great. Member for 37 months. It's a lot of months. Says Schrodinger's Jesus. Checkmate atheists. That's right. He's in both places at once. Is he dead? Is he alive? Until you observe him, you'll never know.
Is he a wave? Is he a particle?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. But that kind of is the checkmate to Christianity, though, right? Because until you observe Jesus, you don't know, you know?
Yep.
You can't.
You have to consider him both alive and dead.
Holocron.
Yeah, I'm totally schooled by the Star Wars nerds in the chat. Absolutely. Thanks.
It's all good. We stand our nerdiness.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love the Star Wars nerds. I love all the nerds in the chat.
Yeah. I frequently enjoy going in other people's chats and saying something nerdy that's in a slightly different nerdery than they're familiar with. And
Look, I especially appreciate the Dark Souls nerds in the chat, just because you know, when you go through I feel like everybody that plays those kind of games is trauma bonded to me. That's how I feel. Okay, don't come at me, but yeah, no, we stand in brotherhood and sisterhood with our fellow sufferers.
There's a lot of games like that recently, as I understand. I don't know. I should play more games. I really should.
Actually, no. Do you know what? I've been throwing out too much. Let's give
I'd like to hear what you have to respond to that argument about the women, Trent.
Right. So I would be cautious in where Alex is going here when we're trying to sift through ancient documents and records. What is historical? What is literary? What is trying to pull one over on us? What is an apologetic motif? I would be worried about the clever forger thesis. This idea that people will say, and I've seen this before in debates about whether Jesus existed, where you have on the far extreme the people who say, no, Jesus never existed. And anytime evidence is presented saying, well, this is really good evidence that there was a man named Jesus.
But I think that's sort of disingenuous by Trent, because he knows that, like, Alex made it perfectly clear that he wasn't a mythicist. He didn't think that the entirety of Jesus was a myth. He didn't say that. So Trent going to this, well, that you see both sides of the spectrum kind of thing, that is just, it's just smoke and mirrors for, hey, I don't, you know, we shouldn't assume that this was made up kind of thing. And it's like, he made it perfectly clear he wasn't assuming that. What he said is an answer to the apologetic of why did they use the women? Women weren't, because of societal norms, weren't believable. He framed this perfectly, because he said it doesn't show that it's a myth, but it does show that the apologetic that's commonly used, saying it wouldn't have been the women if they were making it up as a story. That's not true. It would have been the women if they were making it up as a story. It doesn't make it untrue, but like, it's just there.
Right. Trent is taking the question he was asked, what do you make of the women? And he's substituting, well, these mythicists say.
Yeah.
That's not the point, Trent. What are we doing? But also, Beam Me Up Bob says, is all of Trent's evidence from the Bible? It kind of seems that way. He hasn't presented. The subject is there evidence for the resurrection? And he just keeps citing cherry-picked bits of the Bible so far. Maybe it'll change later.
Maybe.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Tacitus, and it sounds just like them. The recalcitrant, the intransigent mythicist will say, but a very clever Christian forger would make it sound just like Tacitus or just like Josephus. And of course, we'd expect it to sound just like them. But I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So if it doesn't sound like them, it's a forgery. But also, if it sounds like them, it's just a really, really smart forger.
To be clear, I don't believe this. I just want to point out to people that when thinking about forgery, people weren't stupid. But of course, I don't think the story was forged. I just want to say that, like, the 2 points that were important there, I think, Trent, were that the women were the ones who were following Jesus during the Passion, and the women immediately go and get men to verify the facts for them.
Right. So first, then, so we have to go back. And the comparison I was making was between an example in the Gospel of Peter of something that appears, here's a mindset of somebody who is trying to add details just to support the account, versus someone who appears to just be recording the account itself. When it comes to the women, though, like, well, of course, women would be there because they knew the location of the tomb. Well, I would say that Joseph of Arimathea knew the location and is described as a secret disciple of Jesus. And I agree with Dale Allison. I think there's good evidence that this was not made up.
I don't, this secret disciple to do with anything. Right. Like, this sort of secret disciple, it's sort of like, oh, well, you can tell that he existed and that was real because he was a secret disciple. Then how did you know he was a disciple? Because if he was a secret disciple, then you shouldn't be able to see any connection to him. Like, it like his own argument of, well, if it sounds like the author, it's fake. If it doesn't sound like the author, it's fake. And that's not true. That's not how we evaluate it, because you can sound exactly like the author, but if the details of it are inconsistent with the rest of it, then you can say, hey, that probably wasn't the author because it doesn't make any sense. Like, he's sort of attacking a straw man here. But you're sort of saying, hey, because we don't know a lot about Joseph of Arimathea, he was a secret disciple. And if we knew a lot about him, then he was just a disciple. We don't even know he existed, my guy. We don't know that the tomb existed. The fact of the matter is that it would be unusual, pretty unusual for a Roman governor, what equivalent of a governor, to allow a convicted criminal to perform their cultural burial rites. Usually, if you're being crucified, it would not be the case. And we know this because I believe it was Tacitus. I think it was Tacitus that documented that a Roman, upon being petitioned from the crowd, allowed a crucifixion victim to have their cultural burial practices done on him, and he noted how unusual it was. And the guy only did it, the Romans only did it because it was like birthday of Rome or some significant day, some celebration, right? So they would decide to be magnanimous because, you know, it was an important day, where ordinarily they would not allow it. They would not. So I think it's more likely, with Paul not mentioning the tomb, Joseph of Arimathea not being in any way mentioned in any document anywhere, that this guy didn't exist, and the empty tomb didn't exist, and a tomb in general didn't exist. And all that happened was that the body of whoever was crucified was disposed of like any other burial, a pauper's grave or a mass grave on the side of the road, just, you know, just standard way criminals were disposed of.
Yeah. And it's such a weird thing to make up because you don't even need that, because you have Paul with his vision and whatnot. Like even in the gospel stories, Jesus's old body is vaporized or whatever, and he has a new body with a new face. So you don't need an empty tomb to not have a body in it, because he's got a new body. So why is that even there? Now, if you look at it from a scholarly perspective, you of course, you know, Matthew, Luke, John are all at least partially copied from Mark and possibly another source, and yada, yada, yada. But TLDR, the improved copies, we can just set aside. We have Mark, and Mark is written in a very particular style that matches mytho-histories, what we today would call historical fiction, in other Greek writings at the time. It's literally that genre of story. This is like saying
that Hellenistic influence, the Hellenistic stories, which are usually tragedies kind of thing. This very I gotcha. Yeah.
So this is like saying, you know, I once read a romance novel with Fabio on the cover. Now we have a pretty good idea that Fabio exists or existed. I'm not sure if he's still alive, but because there was a real Fabio, and we have this book written in this very specific genre that we understand to be fiction, but the two things together mean that he definitely did all the things in the romance novel. You know, we wouldn't say that, but this is exactly what Trent and other apologists are saying about Mark, possibly because there's the other revisions after the fact. And they're like, oh, well, there's more than one story, so it can't possibly be fiction. Oh, goodness. Scott Duke sent 440 joules with an UNC alert. I don't know what that looks like. Scott doesn't know what an UNC alert is. And an UNC alert is an alert that there's an UNC, and an UNC, it's Zoomer speak or possibly Gen Alpha speak. I'm not entirely sure. I've heard two different versions. One is that it's short for uncool, and the other is that basically it's calling you an ugly old man if you call someone an UNC. I could have it wrong, though, because I am not Gen Z or Gen Alpha, and the people who told me what they think it means may not know either. But That's
so
what
I
I've
mean,
got.
sort of ugly uncle kind of thing, like old uncle kind of stuff. Okay.
I don't know. You know what? Instead of just going by what people have told me, let's look. What
Urban
is
Dictionary?
Let's see. Google says it's short for uncle, but of course, you know, Google has just been making shit up lately. Let's see. TikTok users have been using the phrase unk status to joke that someone is old, which is to say anyone over the age of 25.
I love this one in Urban Dictionary. Unk status. If you had to check, you are an unk. Nice.
God damn it.
Yeah, no, I'll pay that one. I'll pay that one. Yep, absolutely. That is prescient. I love it.
Oh wow. It's oh goodness. Okay, all right. Enough research. I've been called out too many times so far.
Nice. I will pay that one. That one is awesome. I love it.
That someone to fictionalize an account of their beloved rabbi would pay him tribute by having him being buried of an honorable burial by friends and others. And it was not unheard of, by the way, for crucifixion victims to have burials. We have a 1st century skeleton of a man named Yehohanan from a village called Givat Hav Miftar, and he was a crucifixion victim, and he was found in a tomb. Now, so the women itself, you might say, well, look, even if they do see it, you know, it's confirmed by the men in the account, so it's not that big a deal. But then I would ask the question, you know, it's like, okay, if he was making it up, then they would have that and their testimony is fine. But we also have to be careful to say, if it did happen, what would we expect? If the women going to the tomb, not sure what they're going to do just because they want to wail and mourn, and they encounter that it's open and they see Jesus, what would we expect to happen? Well, we'd expect them to go and tell others. And if you heard about this, we wouldn't expect the other male disciples to just do nothing. I'd go check. You would. So
I dislike how they're just nodding along, and I've been critical of Alex from time to time, but like, I really don't like this line of speculation that we get from apologists all the time. Sometimes they do a better job of it than others, but whenever they trot out the what would you expect, it doesn't matter what you would actually expect. They will just say what the Bible says and be like, you'd expect that. Therefore, when the Bible says the thing I just told you should expect, that's confirmation. Is that really what you would expect, though?
Well, and you know, when you say what would you expect, you'd expect them to go away and tell people, but that's not what the earliest text, which is Mark, says. It says they told no one at all. They said nothing to anyone. You know, and like, you may say, well, they were afraid. What were they afraid of? Because this was their Lord and Savior. And you might have said, oh, they were afraid of being judged. They were afraid of being heretics. They're afraid. But the person in the tomb, according to Mark, says, do not be alarmed. I will go and I will meet them in Galilee. Right? So why would you have the disciples going to the tomb if they relayed, they will meet you in Galilee?
Yeah. Well, we need to verify, though. And in fairness, if someone had told me that someone I was close to had come back from the dead and wanted me to meet him in West Virginia, I'd go check first.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
So I think it fits. We always have to ask that question. What would we expect if X happened? Does it conform to that? And it still goes back to just following the evidence where it goes. But I think, and I want to put this here because we're going to run out of time real soon. It's how it goes in this exchange, and I love it because we're having a lot of fun. I would just encourage everyone listening. Look, we've got something very extraordinary here. We have I think Alex and I both agree. It's very, very clear. Jesus did die. He existed. He died. Yep. And then, well, I guess this is how it works, Alex. You can see if I'm right about this. It's like we close in on the resurrection event from two directions, very strong evidence, and it moves towards this thing in the middle we're trying to figure out. So it's like Jesus died, undeniable. There's within a few years, we have people.
Well, it's deniable, but we'll grant it for the sake of argument.
I don't know if in a few years is accurate, sir. Like, I want to see what he says, but if he's saying in a few, we don't know what happened in a few years, because the earliest transcripts we have is like the letters that Paul wrote, which is 30 odd years. Like, in a few years, like, you may have said, hey, this what happened straight after, but that's not from a few years after. Like, let's be clear about this. What we have are documents saying what happened right afterwards. We don't have the documents from, you know, someone sitting there recording what happened straight afterwards. Like, let's be clear on that.
Yeah, the Jerusalem Post was taking a break in the 1st century.
People proclaiming he had risen bodily from the dead. So now it's like we're trying to get back to that Easter Sunday morning and trying to figure out I think everyone can agree something happened. And I think it's up to everyone should really look into this the data, to put forward what explains that happened. And I think resurrection, it does explain all the data without having to compress or force it really, whereas other explanations tend to have to bring in more ad hoc elements.
More ad hoc elements? Trent, you were talking about a guy that dressed up as a Roman soldier in order to hear the conversation between the Sanhedrin and the Roman soldiers. Like, you literally inserted a ninja into the thing.
Spies and ninjas, but it's not ad hoc though.
Right. It's not ad hoc. It isn't, because I don't remember the text ever. I don't remember Matthew ever explaining how anybody associated with Jesus knew that the Sanhedrin had a secret conversation with the Roman soldiers saying, hey, tell everybody that they took the body so it won't be miraculous.
It's wild. So Trent is relying on a thing that Frank Turek does sometimes. Is he saying, well, Jesus lived, Jesus died. Cool. Later, people believed in Jesus as having resurrected. Something precipitated that belief. Therefore, something happened around 33 CE.
Sure.
Was it a resurrection? Well, that explains all the evidence. Does it though? Because like, that's not really a valid explanation, but whatever. The fact that people believe later, it doesn't mean something did happen. That's sneaking in a conclusion, you know?
Well, I think, and I think something happened is certainly the case, right? Like, but when you look at the sort of the problems that the people had at the time, the first Jewish war happening literally 60, 70 years after this event, you know, was something miraculous happening, or was a religion getting prominent because it really did push back on the hierarchical nature of Roman civilization? Were people backing it because the Romans were rich, they were poor, and they were kind of fed up with it? And they were kind of fed up with the Sanhedrin kind of working with the Romans to, oppress the population. You know, it kind of is, well, yes, something happened, but what evidence do you have that it was this miraculous thing?
Yeah, a lot of people believe a lot of things for a lot of reasons, but I mean, the radical progressivism of the Jesus cult in that time and place, I might subscribe for the political change it could represent, necessarily because I believe.
Yeah. I think that sort of, you know, if I was in my country and there was a, you know, just say the Chinese had occupied, all right, I don't think that's going to, just say, for instance, and somebody had a religion that was gaining momentum and sort of spoke against the excesses of the Chinese sort of, you know, they were having orgies, spending money, they were rich and had all of, you know, a lot of the goods and were taxing heavily. I might get aboard with that religion just because it represents a, hey, give all your possessions to the poor. It basically is an antithesis to the occupying culture at the time. Doesn't mean that I believe it, but I believe what they're doing. It is a possibility, but one that apologists will never entertain. You know, and just sort of say, no, that couldn't possibly be the reason. Why not?
Yeah, it's almost like, for a couple hundred years, people were running around doing nice things for others and saying in Jesus' name as a kind of code and understanding, like, from the story of the Good Samaritan and whatever, like, Jesus tells us we should do nice things, so that's why we're doing nice things, this sort of thing. And other people come along and kind of pull a derp and just take literally. So Jesus really lived and died and rose from the dead and so forth. And it's like, no, bestie, you're missing the point.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that happened, right? But I think that when we're looking at how religion has been used for political power before and since, let's face it, like, I don't have to explain this to you, how people have used religion as a motivating factor for political movements. Nobody has to explain that to you, which is more likely that a guy violated the laws of nature and rose from the dead, or that this religion was pivotal in motivating the Jewish population to rising up against an oppressing alien force. I know which one is more likely in my mind. You may differ. I get you. You may differ.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to kind of take stock, and I mean, presumably there are a number of facts here that scholars and historians discuss.
Yep.
One of them would be the crucifixion. I think you'd be on board with that.
Yep.
We have the empty tomb. It seems like you might be agnostic about the empty tomb. And then the appearances, you think that there were appearances of Jesus in a sense of people had visions, hallucinations?
I'm hypothesizing.
Where do you stand on this?
I'm saying that there are sort of levels of skepticism. Like there are like doors that need to sort of be broken open, right? And as you say, it sort of goes in that order. It's like, was there a man called Jesus? Yes. Okay. What's next? He was crucified. Okay. Yes. What's next? He was laid in the tomb. Okay. Maybe. What's next? And then we sort of keep going. Trent said earlier at the very beginning of this debate, he said, the evidence that Jesus was alive after his death is as good as the evidence that he was alive before his death. I don't know if that's what you believe, or if it just sort of came out that way.
Well, I think I meant to say that there are similar kinds of ways to verify that. You could show someone's alive with people saying we saw him.
Sure, but I just don't think it's true, because of course one of the reasons why we're so certain of Jesus' existence is a relatively speaking to the ancient world, a wealth of extra biblical sources by supporters, by opponents, just referencing the existence of this person. Of course, we don't have any like references to appearances to Jesus after his death outside of what could be apologetical material, but certainly as material of his supporters, including some events which you might suspect have some attention drawn to them elsewhere, such as the appearance of the 500 in Paul.
Well, it would be very hard to find non-Christian testimony of a Christian fact like the resurrection, because if one were convicted of that fact.
I'm not just looking for that.
But if it really happened, it shouldn't be, because then it wouldn't be a Christian fact. It would just be a fact.
Yes. And you have sort of extra sort of textual sources for sort of other events, like for instance Hannibal crossing the Alps kind of thing, right? With elephants. Okay, like you might say, oh, that's ridiculous, that never happened, it was glossed up. We do have more evidence that actually happened, and not partly at which is the Romans saying that the Carthaginians came from the north with they had elephants.
Yeah.
Right. Their enemies said they had elephants. So this is kind of something that I believe they found some evidence of the Carthaginian army passing through the Alps, basically. I don't think they found evidence of elephants, but it wasn't just the recordings by, Barca and Hannibal basically saying, hey, we brought elephants. Also, the Romans recorded it as well, which would be very unlikely for the Romans to record something when they don't see elephants, and it sort of adds to the mythicism of Hannibal as this insanely capable and incredible leader. Like, why would the Romans record that to add to the legend of Hannibal? I have no idea.
I mean, I could posit some reasons, the Carthaginians are really scary. They brought freaking elephants over the dang mountains. We should go, blow up their city so they're never a threat again.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's essentially what happened, wasn't it? Like, they basically So the sort of it's one, I'm not sure if it's one of the very first or the first, but it is a case where the doctrine of sort of salting the earth, basically destroying all of the farms, destroying your own own lands, so that the enemy has no supply, basically. And then they sort of went off and attacked Carthage directly, so that, you know, basically they had to give up on Rome. Like, they couldn't defeat him in the field. They tried a lot.
Yeah, they had 3 big old wars about it. And although it's interesting that the Romans record they destroyed the city and salted the ground so that Carthage could never rise and be a threat again, and then 100 years later there's a Roman city called Carthage on the same location.
Didn't think that one through, did you? But that was sort of more when they found that Hannibal was attacking Rome directly. He was basically rampaging through the countryside, destroying everything on the Italian peninsula, and they couldn't stop him. Right? They'd tried to attack him, and he had better tactics. He really was a military genius, and Rome acknowledged that. Right, that he was a better general. So what they did was they destroyed everything. So he had no way to forage for provisions. He couldn't take anything from the people. It really was a horrendous decision of, hey, let's destroy everything, burn all of the crops, so he can no longer, stay in the Italian peninsula, because you've got to get your food from somewhere, and he certainly didn't have supply lines coming through the Alps. I'll tell you that right now. So yeah, and he requested support from Carthage because, of course, Carthage was a major sea power, right? They're the descendants of the Phoenicians. They were a major sea power, but they didn't back him. They didn't think he could do it. If he did get Carthage's support, he probably would have taken Rome, and it would have been, this world would have looked completely different. But he didn't get support.
So those of you with a time machine, that's another possible turning point you could tinker with.
Yeah, not sure Carthage being the central authority for the early Middle Ages is such a good idea. I'm not sure if an ancient world led by Carthage is necessarily better, to be honest with you.
Well, I don't know that you would necessarily have to hand it over to Carthage, because consider this. What if you waited until Hannibal got his no from Carthage, and then you showed up with a whole bunch of modern MREs and whatnot? And so Hannibal, no longer loyal to Carthage, takes over Rome.
Yeah.
Now we have a third completely different history.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we've got to, like, Rome, I kind of blame everything on Rome, right? Like, so as far as empire building goes, they were pretty shocking. They still had, like, we do have the idea of the Republic from Rome kind of thing. Like, they did develop a whole load of stuff, so we can't ignore what they gave to the world. But at the same time, they really had a horrible way of looking at the world where everything is Rome or it is nothing, basically. Like this whole idea of, if you're not with us, you are going to be burnt to the ground.
Yeah, either kneel or be conquered.
Mm-hmm.
Except the Germans, apparently, because even though there was that vast technological gap, they couldn't subdue the damn Germans. And in fairness, neither could the Huns. Like, the reason the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths and all these others got pushed into the Western Empire was because the Huns showed up, and they couldn't fight the Huns, and so they just went west ahead of the Huns.
Yeah. Yep. Just leave the area.
Yeah. Nobody could. Apparently, the mountains were the only problem that could stop the Huns.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for.
That is such a weird thing in history, too, though, right? Because, like, they cross all of Asia, they cross 3/4 of Europe, and then they get to one mountain range and just stop. I don't know. I'm sure they had their reasons. It just looks weird from this far in the future.
Well, no one could stop the Mongol hordes either. They absolutely rampaged through Europe during the Middle Ages, like absolutely rampaged, and they were stopped by internal division.
Politics.
Yeah, just the Genghis Khan died. His sons fought over who was to be in charge. One horde, the Golden Horde, became sort of multiple hordes at that point, and they, you know, it sort of shows how incredibly powerful cooperation is. Because as soon as they weren't cooperating, they weren't a threat anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing that happened with Islam. Like, in one generation, a single caliphate stretched across the longest part of the longest continent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody has ever conquered that much land that fast. And yet, as soon as Muhammad died...
yeah, not really. I think the British Empire did. I think the British Empire is probably the largest in history. Yeah, because it took, like, on the age of colonization, it kind of took so much land from India to the Americas to, you know, like just so much. I mean, the largest empire in history was the British Empire. It certainly
had hundreds of years to build it up.
Well, that's true. That's true. I'm not sure in one generation. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. But I think that colonization was still very, very quick. Like from when they started the age of exploration to colonization kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, just the spread across the United States. Granted, we were no longer part of the United Kingdom at that point, but yeah, like 100 years, and we were already on the other edge of the continent. It just nutty stuff. Anyway, tangents.
So, for example, in Jesus' sort of lifetime, we have sort of people who believe. You could have an extra biblical source that people believe 500 people had seen Jesus. You could have an extra biblical source that says 500 people claim to see Jesus. In fact, even if we had, if we discovered a historical source that just corroborated the 500, wasn't an eyewitness testimony, but just said, and 500 people, and here were some of their names, and here's where it occurred, claimed to see Jesus, I would see that as incredible evidence for the resurrection. Not because it needs to be something that an opponent couldn't have written, but just because it would be something that's like corroborating. It shows that there is an event which was known to other people.
I don't know, Alex. I think because you might just say, well, Tacitus or someone else just got this from someone who read Paul, and so there might be questions about whether it's independently attested. But the 500, by the way, the 500, I would say, this is a mysterious thing. I think what makes a lot of sense of it is in Matthew 28, that's where we talk about those who doubted in the appearance on the mountain or the hilltop in Galilee. I think it very well could be because there is the description of talking about might go and appear to my brothers and other, those, described in Mark and in Matthew. And we have that fulfillment there. And that would make sense if there were, like, especially if you had like the Sermon on the Mount, right? You're on a mount. That's how hundreds of people can hear you in the ancient world when you're talking to them. I've been to that area in Galilee myself.
Me too.
That being on a mountain doesn't enhance anybody's ability to hear you. And in the ancient world, they did the exact opposite. Amphitheaters had the speaker in a recess, and then the seats went up around them. We still use the same technology in college lecture halls today.
Yeah.
Because it works better. Like,
yeah, and I would say that it would certainly allow people to see him easier, hear him not so much.
Yeah. So
if it was like an area that was depressed with maybe some cliffs or some hills behind them, maybe, that may be the case. But I don't think, just being on a hill by itself allows you great clarity of speech.
Yeah. And also, it doesn't really matter if they could hear him because nobody wrote it down for 60 years. So it was this really great speech, though. Can you imagine someone trying to write one of Obama's hope and change speeches from memory today? And it's only been 14 years, 15, or maybe slightly longer. Like we're a quarter of the way to 60 years later, and there's not a chance.
But I do agree with Alex. Like, it would be good evidence to have an extra biblical source, and yeah, it wouldn't be overwhelming by itself, but it definitely is better than just one guy saying that 500 people witnessed the return of Jesus, and he's spoken to them. Trust me, bro. Like, I think that is very, very poor.
It's very poor. It's very sus, and it's exactly what you would expect if someone were making this shit up. To borrow Trent's phrase.
Yeah. And you can't forget that this is 70 years after the things supposedly happened. I mean, yeah, Paul 30 years, but when you're talking about the Gospels, you're talking about over half a century later. Like, 50 years is a long time to try and recall events or try to, put stories to paper or what have you. It is very, very difficult to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to improvise a lot of details.
That would make sense. That, okay, so we have a large enough area for someone to see someone like that. And that would explain, if you have 500 people, those who didn't know Jesus as well, those could be the doubters versus those who knew him very well.
The only point that I'm making is that I don't know if I would say that about that evidence. I have no idea. But what I'm saying is that when you say that we have just as good reasons to think that he was alive before the crucifixion as after, I just don't think that's true. We might have just as good sort of testimony from like the Gospels, maybe. But the thing that makes the historical Jesus case so strong and undeniable is the extra biblical material. You don't have any of that for the post-resurrection appearances.
Maybe because I would still find the evidence from the Gospels and Paul's letters to Jesus existing to be enough. But for me, it's like, okay, if Jesus did not rise from the dead, it becomes much more difficult to explain why James, who didn't believe, converted, why Paul, who was a persecutor, converted, and why all of these scared and frightened apostles boldly proclaim this truth. I think it fulfills that explanatory datum here very well.
I understand what you're saying, Trent. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have enough reason to believe in the resurrection. I'm saying specifically the claim that you have as much good reason to believe that Jesus was alive before the crucifixion as afterwards.
Sure. Hey, I'm willing to dial that. I'm willing to trade that one for you're reasonable to believe in the resurrection.
Secondly,
I'm willing to I'll make a trade on that.
Secondly,
just
I would too.
They'll back off.
Yeah. So that is sort of a bold claim. He is backpedaling on that claim. I think that's pretty sensible for him to do so, because a lot of apologists will trot out these claims and then just stick with it no matter what, and it becomes absurd. Like it becomes and this one is in that category. Like, we have just as much reason to believe that Jesus was alive after the resurrection as he was before the resurrection. I think that is ludicrous. That is absolutely ludicrous. So I'm glad that
it's just propaganda.
Yeah. It's just one of those sort of apologetics that they trot out without, because, I mean, look, let's face it. If he trotted this out in a church, everyone would just be on board. Yes, clap, clap. Yes, amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Without actually thinking about it. So I'm really glad that Alex really, really stuck by this one, even though he's trying to make it about, but it is reasonable. Well, that wasn't the claim, sir. That wasn't the claim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's to give Alex his due. That's not the area I would have focused on, and that's a good area to focus on. Like, when you catch your opponent making you expect to hear these kinds of claims from apologists because they say them all the time. It's brain numbing material. But if you catch them saying the thing, call them on it. Be like, really? Because from my point of view, saying there's as much evidence that Jesus lived after his death as before his death, to me is conceding that there's very little evidence he lived before his death either.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. But I mean, the question is, like, why should he have a ton of people? There's no good evidence for any one person to have lived back then anyway, unless it's someone like Pontius Pilate or somebody significant. It's not like today where they had births, deaths, and marriages. They have a registry of these things. That they generally didn't. They may note down how many people are in an area in a census, but they didn't do like you've had this child born, please register it with the government kind of thing. That isn't how it worked back then. So, but that doesn't go in favor of Jesus being real. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. Because the exact same thing, lack of evidence, if they didn't exist, it would be the same as if they did exist. And the resurrection debate isn't hinging on that anyway. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
find it really important when people talk about like the persecution of the apostles. You kind of get this merging between like people like Peter and people like Paul. You know, like earlier you were talking about how, you know, the persecution of the apostles is clear. If you look at Paul's letters, he talks very clearly about the persecutions he underwent. Certainly so. But remember what Paul saw. Remember the nature of Paul's experience. It's a flash of light. Paul did not meet the bodily resurrected Jesus, and that's the thing that we're discussing, whether Jesus bodily resurrected from the dead. I don't want to say admit, you just assert as well as anyone else could that people can happily die for things that they think are true but didn't see themselves. The whole point is that they need to have seen it themselves, and Paul did not see a bodily resurrected Jesus. Who's the earliest martyr? Who's the earliest Christian martyr? I mean,
Stephen would be the first martyr, and then James's description in Acts chapter 12.
It's Stephen, okay? And what is Stephen martyred for? Having a vision in the sky. He looks up and he sees Jesus stood or sat at the right hand of the Father, and he's stoned to death for it. The earliest martyrdom story we have is of a vision. The most obvious persecution that we have firsthand is that of Paul, whose experience was that of a vision. The idea of the physical resurrection of Jesus, even if we agree that Peter was persecuted, we don't know what it is that Peter saw. Yeah, we have some like second, third-hand accounts from the Gospels. That's if you believe the traditional authorship. But that's not the same thing as saying that that we know for a fact that an eyewitness to a specific event was persecuted for belief in that event. Even with James, we don't know why he was put to death. Surely, I mean, the most plausible conclusion is that he was preaching Christianity. Herod says that this was pleasing to the Jews when he kills James. But we just don't know the details, at least not strongly enough.
Josephus says that.
There's a lot there, because again, after the head priest dude dies, you get splintering and everybody starts making up their own version. And that's exactly what you'd expect from a human interpretation rather than something divine happening. If everyone had the same story, if everyone were immediately talking about a physically resurrected Jesus rather than having visions of Jesus with the Father and so on and so forth, it might be a different story, but that isn't the story we have.
Right.
But also, I just want to randomly throw out that Justin Martyr is definitionally the first martyr, because that's where the word comes from.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yes.
Details.
He was stoned to death for being a lawbreaker, and he's specifically referenced in Josephus as the brother of Christ, the one who was called Christ.
Yes, I understand that, but you know, we just don't know the details of the reasons behind the martyrdom of this apostle. I think, although look, this is maybe a question for Sean McDowell. I just want to say that on the point of persecution, we need to be very careful about who we're talking about and keep it separate. Let's not say, look, we know that the apostles were persecuted because look at the letters of Paul. And we know that Paul was persecuted.
But it's not just that. We also have the testimony in the book of Acts, and we also have Tacitus talking about the Neronian persecution.
But then that's not firsthand, right? You understand what I'm saying? Is that,
like, it doesn't necessarily have to be firsthand, because I think there's good evidence that Luke was a traveling companion of Paul and that he's a good historian.
Is that because of the we passages?
Cool. Luke, traveling companion of Paul and a good historian. Let's just grant that. How many witnesses does Luke record?
None.
Because it's not 500. He gives a different number.
And we don't know it was Luke. So the Gospel of Luke, that they assume it's Luke because Luke is supposed to be a very very comprehensive sort of scribe's account. It's very, very sort of dry, matter of fact kind of thing. But so Luke was supposed to be a merchant of some sort, I believe, in the sort of history of it. But we don't know it was actually Luke. It's not like there's only one person who you know could do scribal records. We don't know it was Luke. It was just a well-educated person. That's it.
A person of letters and the writings and things.
What was he? Yeah, he was a physician. So he was a doctor kind of thing. So, you know, presumably very well educated. But we don't know that is actually Luke that wrote it. We don't know that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's one element to it. And I've read the critiques of people trying to say that's some kind of seagoing narrative motif. And I think
I wasn't going to go down that route. I was just going to say that, do you therefore reject the traditional authorship of John's Gospel? Because near the end of John's Gospel in John chapter 20, the beloved disciple is referred to seeing something, and the author of John's Gospel says, and we know that his testimony is true. And given that we passages mean that it's speaking in the first person, that means that John was not authored by the beloved disciple, right?
it is possible that John was authored by someone else, like John the Presbyter, that was part of the Johannine community. So I do think it provides other evidence. I don't think it's as strong as Luke, for example. But that's why, as I said before, I think that you don't want to take a dogmatic view when you're making a historical case.
Yes.
You're going to weigh things a little bit. And so
it's important because, I mean, John asked about the empty tomb, which I didn't have a chance to speak about. I wanted to, I mean, a moment ago, you said that, look, it's important to ask, what would you expect if it were true? And I agree with you. The data fits with what would happen if it were true. What I'm saying is it also fits with what would happen if it were not true. And in that position as an agnostic, I'm not going to believe in the resurrection, right? It might not be enough for a Christian to abandon faith.
Okay.
But I believe it does, because I think there are other explanations. For example, looking at the empty tomb, this is really important, right? The empty tomb is like a key point here. Like, okay, I don't know if there was an empty tomb. I mean, I think just like prima facie, I have some suspicion that a member of the Sanhedrin could just like ask Pilate to take the body off the cross and like keep it for himself, when typically Romans would leave bodies on the cross as evidence of crucifixion. Maybe because it was a Jewish holiday. I mean, they say it's because of the Jewish holiday they take them down from the cross, as if Pilate cares about Jewish holidays. Maybe he does because he doesn't want to like incite a riot or something. Maybe. I'm not entirely sure. But let's just say that there were some kind of tomb. What's the nature of this tomb? We're told it's Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, only in Matthew's gospel. John's gospel seems to imply that it's specifically not Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. In fact, in John chapter 19, verse 38, it's Joseph and Nicodemus who are taking the body of Jesus. And it says, at the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden was a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, this is the day before the Sabbath. So they had to solve this problem before the Sabbath began. That is, before Friday night. And there's this tomb that happens to be nearby. What do you think of the odds that a wealthy aristocrat like Joseph of Arimathea would own a tomb, not on his property, but near a crucifixion site for Roman criminals? That seems extremely unlikely. What's more likely is what John tells us, which is that there was a tomb near...
Well, it's in a garden after all.
Come on, a garden near a crucifixion site? That's obviously true.
Yes. You get the best fertilizer from the mass grave. But also, who's putting tombs in the garden? I don't know. I mean, if I lived in the Shire, in hobbit holes and things, I might put my tomb in the garden because it's pretty, and that's that. I don't know.
Tombs would be outside the city. It's an unclean site, and that's exactly what we find when we do archaeological investigations in Jerusalem. And you would have people executed outside of the city, outside of the gates.
I think what John is saying, but in terms of where you would put the remains, I think if Joseph owns a tomb, it's unlikely to be near this site of crucifixion. And in fact, I think John's gospel is telling us that by saying that it's because it's the day of Jewish preparation. It doesn't. If this was just Joseph's tomb, why would it be because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they put Jesus there? It seems to me that...
What if they just put him in the closest tomb, and then when the owner found out, he had the body removed, and that's the whole thing, and then they added the Joseph of Arimathea character to be like, no, it was his tomb, and he gave permission.
Right,
it's excusegetic. Like, to be clear, I don't believe there is a tomb because it doesn't show up until generations later in the stories, but like that might explain that particular weird bit in the stories.
Yeah.
It's like,
maybe that's why there was
water in my tomb.
Maybe that's why there were guards on it, because this guy didn't want like random Jewish people dumping bodies in his tomb.
I mean, if you're going to leave an open tomb near a crucifixion site, some random
hooligans
are going to drop bodies in it.
Just asking for trouble. Yeah. You just imagine his wife, Joseph, why you put our tomb near slums? Like, why? Now there's some random guy in our tomb.
How fucked up would that be? If you like go for a walk in your garden and you have like a garden shed or something, and people have just dumped a dead body in it. I don't know. I'd be calling the Centurions. I'd be like, we need to investigate what is going on.
This is like an emergency burial in time for the Sabbath. When does the Sabbath end? It ends on Saturday night. So then the burial party come to this emergency tomb, take the body of Jesus, and give it a proper burial. Early that morning, when it's still dark, so a few hours later, Mary comes along, sees an empty tomb, sees that the stone has already been rolled away, and says what? She assumes that the body has been taken. So there are two hypotheses here. One is that it's stolen. Some people think the body is stolen. We have good evidence for the stealing of bodies in the ancient world. You'll know about the Nazareth inscription, a 1st century Greek sort of legal inscription from an unknown Roman emperor, which issues the death penalty for people who steal bodies and tamper with tombs. So we know that in the ancient world, people were stealing bodies. We also have epitaphs on Jewish graves, cursing people who steal bodies. We know that the stealing of bodies was something done popularly enough that they had to warn against it. We also know, of course, about the polemic in Matthew's gospel, which specifically says that there is a rumor that Jesus' body has been stolen. People are obviously believing this even by the time of the writing of Matthew's gospel. But it doesn't have to be. And you ask, well, who would steal it? One of the reasons people stole bodies was for use in like magical incantations, like magicians and the like. And of course, they specifically wanted people who'd undergone violent deaths, and the idea of a holy man who'd undergone a violent death.
What if it was Luke? Because consider, physicians have been stealing corpses in order to study anatomy for so long. Like, the Egyptians have texts about it saying, hey, we had to steal this cadaver, but here's what we learned about where the appendix is.
Yeah. It was Jesus was an inside job.
There's also,
that's right, it was Luke all along.
It was an inside job. Yeah.
The fact that the burial party of Jesus is said in John's gospel to have given him emergency burial right nearby the place, because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and it's after the Sabbath that the tomb is now empty, and Mary Magdalene sees the tomb, and her first thought is that they've taken the Lord and we do not know where they have put him. Like, I'm not going to say that the body was taken. I don't even know if there was an empty tomb, but if there were, the idea that it was taken either by a grave robber or by the burial party of Joseph of Arimathea is exceptionally more likely to me than that Jesus rose from the dead. Again, I won't say it didn't happen. I just want to say that that's a skeptical scenario, which seems to me perfectly plausible. Since you asked about the
Trent, can I just give you a few minutes to respond to those claims about the empty tomb?
Of course. And I would just say, Alex, yes, what you were doing here is essentially you're being a clever barrister for the atheist cause that you don't have to prove. You're just, creating doubt. Perhaps this other thing happened.
I just lack a belief.
Well, that's not, again, with the courtroom bullshit. Yeah. We're not trying to prove a case. We're saying any of these are aliens beaming the body up for study is a more likely possibility than fucking magic.
Yeah, so
you have a very high bar, Trent, and no reason to get us to it.
They're claiming that a supernatural, unseen event that is beyond the laws of nature and physics occurred in 0 AD in ancient Palestine, and that this magical, that somehow divinity and a omnipotent, like, creation God is the best explanation. And we're saying, hey, there's a ton of other explanations which are better, including aliens beamed up the freaking body. Like, seriously, it is a better explanation, because at least it is not violating the laws of nature. But, and all of the evidence that you point to is hearsay, is visions, is really, really inconsistent accounts. It's very poor evidence. And you want to say, oh, but you're working for your atheist. No, this is just pure skepticism. That's all it is.
Like, we're not even, like, Alex is being so gentle on Trent, and I get he does this. He has to maintain his relationship, so they'll come on his podcast and all this crap. But, like, the entailments that come along with the story, like, it's not just Jesus who came back from the dead. In Matthew, we get the zombie army that no one mentioned. Isn't even in any of the other stories. But, like, the actual historians working in the Roman provincial government seat, none of them noticed the zombie army invading the city. And that comes with the story. If you're going to say this story is gospel truth, then you have to own that part.
Well, the funny part is that he danced around that it wasn't the gospel truth. Like, he was talking about, like, what's our allegorical and what is, and it's like, well, when you go down that route, you ultimately get to a place where you can sufficiently dismiss all of the supernatural stuff as allegorical. You don't have to take any of it on board. Like, because once you start to do that, you are basically saying, oh, well, some of it's metaphor, it's hyperbole, it's, poetic way of speaking. Well, how do you tell the difference? Apart from, you need some parts to be allegorical because the text has problems.
Yeah. And it's awfully damn convenient that the parts that couldn't possibly happen, those are metaphor, but the rest is literal. And it keeps shifting. The bar keeps moving for that too. The goalposts are dancing around. You know, back in the day, Genesis was literal, but now that we know it cannot happen, oh, it was a metaphor all along.
Well, but that's the thing. I think, though, when we're looking, we can say something did happen here. And I wanted to comment on what you said earlier. You could say,
I also want to point out that revisionism has a long tradition in Christian history, not just in the first couple of centuries, but ever since. Like we were talking about earlier with the conversion of the Roman Empire. You know, Theodosius, Constantine got things started by making Christianity no longer a crime, but Theodosius promoted it to the level of official state religion, to the point they were kicking the other temples out of Rome, you know? And then immediately after, while Theodosius was still emperor, Rome falls. So the people are looking around and they're going, we changed religions, we abandoned the gods who made Rome great, and we brought in this other god who apparently can't defend anything. And immediately our city that has not had an invader cross its walls in over 800 years falls. The real gods are clearly very pissed. And that's what inspired Augustine, is he wrote City of God specifically to rewrite the history of Christianity, to present the case that, you know, Rome's greatness in the past shouldn't be chalked up to the old gods, much like Rome's fall today shouldn't be chalked up to the new god. Because secular states are separate from religion. We shouldn't hold the church to account for this, because people were ready to just dismantle St. Peter's and chuck it into the ocean. And he's like, no, it's not our fault. Even though the day before, the church is above the throne, you know?
And just on a minor point of shifting the goalposts, we've gone from Trent saying the resurrection happened to Trent saying something happened. I mean, I cannot imagine, like, you know, you can sit there and go, well, the Branch Davidians, something happened, right? Like, you know, the entire Waco, Texas siege, something happened. That doesn't necessarily mean the claims of the people involved are true.
Yeah, there's a big difference between something happened and the thing I said definitely happened. It's wild. One thing I can demonstrate definitely happened. Left-Handed Jedi sent us a super chat for $2. Thank you, Jedi. And says, Rome, I've fallen and I can't get up. And that's historically accurate. I mean, of course, the West did persist for a little while longer. Not much, thanks to Theodosius and also the Huns.
Well, the Eastern Roman Empire persisted for a lot longer.
In fact, I've heard historians are divided on this one. Some say it was a screw up to separate East and West because Rome got cut off from the rich Eastern provinces. They lost the financial resources, they lost the military resources, and they were just screwed. But others say the division is what preserved the Eastern Empire, because the West was just screwed and it would have dragged the East down with it without the division.
I would probably submit to the second one, to be honest with you. I think that with everything, I think that the Western Empire was sort of, because don't forget, everything would be taken to Rome. Rome was the priority kind of thing. So I think it would have been taking resources away from the East and just shoving them into a lost cause. You know, like, I don't think it would have propped up Rome in any way. I think it was declining and basically on its way out. I don't think that the East sacrificing all of their resources would have preserved it. You know,
there is some basis for that, because while the situation did change sometimes rapidly over the next few centuries, multiple Eastern emperors did try to reconquer Rome, and they kept failing. They couldn't hold the peninsula.
Yeah, sure. Resurrection explains all the data, but so does no resurrection. But I would say no resurrection is not a hypothesis. It is an umbrella under which you would put specific hypotheses that would have to be weighed upon their merits and the data that they do explain. And that there is no single explanation, usually what skeptics have to do is they must conjoin different things.
Yep.
So missing body along with group hallucinations. And when you start conjoining hypotheses, that lowers their probability when you do that. So you I would say for people, okay, look at it. Resurrection explains it.
That's not what conjoining means, but also, no, I don't. See, we had somebody in the chat earlier who was saying you haven't provided a superior, more believable alternative hypothesis. That's not how anything works. I realize people get hung up on courtroom stuff, and defense attorneys love to propose alternative theories of cases in order to introduce reasonable doubt. You don't actually have to do that.
Correct.
You only have to say, I don't believe your claim. That is sufficient. You don't need to make something up as an alternative.
Right. It's like, and stuff like, it's almost like they're saying, well, the state has to provide the motivation for this person to do that. They don't. They don't, actually. It's helpful. It's very, very good to do so, but they don't have to do that in order to, make a case work. All they have to do is show that somebody actually did it, or beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody actually did it. They don't have to come up with an, alternative explanation of why, what was their motivation? Why would they do that? They don't have to show that. They don't have to. It's useful, but they don't have to show it. All they have to show, and we're really talking about, if you want to compare it to a case, we're really talking about you making the claim, right, that Jesus rose from the dead. We don't have to show the motivation of people to be unreliable witnesses or any of this kind of stuff. All we have to do is show that they're unreliable. That's it. And if it's like a court case, we don't even know who the witnesses are. Apart from Paul, who, says, I didn't see it myself. I saw a vision. Well, cool. And I spoke to 500 people. Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Yeah. If
you're making a claim, right, you don't have to have an alternate hypothesis, right? This is kind of the weird thing that people think, like, oh, if you're putting a claim out there, you've got to come up with a better explanation. No, you don't. It's like someone claiming that God created the universe. Oh, well, you've got to have a better explanation of how the universe came together. No. Like, that's the thing that flat earthers were pissing off a lot of normal people by saying, oh, I'm attacking the earth, your model. I don't have to have a better model. They're right. They're 100% right.
Well, sort of. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're dealing with the science. I ran into this when I was working on my physics program, and I was railing against the Big Bang because I thought it was an attempt for religious people to try to get Genesis into science. And I was like, well, if the Big Bang is wrong, then we're going to have the wrong predictions and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people were like, doesn't matter. You have to have a better idea, or it doesn't matter if it's wrong. You don't have to disprove the Big Bang. Just bring us a better model and demonstrate that. And I'm like, these are separate things. Having a better model is great, but we're only going to develop that if we stop putting all our research into Ptolemy's geocentric epicycles and shit. And we went back and forth. But ultimately what settled the matter is we knew from Newton's time that Newton's model was wrong. It couldn't explain the orbit of Mercury, but it was useful. So we used the model knowing it had flaws. So this is where flat earthers sometimes think they have a leg to stand on, is they're saying, we don't have to provide a better working model. We just have to be skeptical. But the thing of it is, even if they were right, you do actually need to provide a more accurate model, because science will use a model that is known to be wrong if it gives you the most accurate results until we get a better one.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, right? Like, I think that, if they say, hey, your model is not right, part of the way you prove that is by coming up with a model that explains the facts better, kind of thing. I totally get that. But they do not need to come up with a better model to prove yours wrong. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Like, if they basically show that, the planets do this when they shouldn't do, and your model is completely inaccurate in recording the the traveling of the planets in our hemisphere. Well, yeah, that would be, they're not presenting a better model. They're just saying, hey, yours is wrong. That is valid, right? Like, that is something that you could do. They never do it, by the way. That this is never done. Yeah. But a lot of their arguments seem to be based upon, well, you're wrong because it is flat. And that's where they get themselves into trouble, because they're not then criticizing your model. They're saying my one's correct. And so a lot of these debates started to come out framed as Earth, globe Earth on trial kind of thing, because they didn't want to go into their own claims. And I think it's really disingenuous, because they're sort of saying, hey, it can't be a globe because it's flat. They just did not want to talk about their own model, because their own model consists of Bible says flat. That basically is their model. That is how they know. It always comes back to the Bible. Even someone famous like Austin Whitsitt, it always came back to the Bible. It would invariably lead back to the devil and Bible. It's sort of like this. It's a religious position. But I think that if you are sort of doing a debate where somebody is just saying, hey, I'm just going to attack your view, I think that is valid right up until the point where they will inevitably or most likely sort of say, one of the reasons you're wrong is that mine is right. They will do that. And at that point, they've opened the door to you attacking their position. But I think that in order to prove a theory wrong, you do not have to have any other hypothesis.
Right. And that's the distinction I was trying to get at, is that Trent's got this courtroom idea of you have to present a better alternate. No, I can not accept your claim if you can't demonstrate your claim. That's all that's necessary. I don't need a better claim. And conversely, flat earthers is the other way around. If you're proposing a better model, then you need to bring a better model. So they need to switch places, but they won't, because they're doing what they're doing specifically to be dishonest.
What other things do explain it? And you'll start to run into problems of starting to squish and ignore the data or compress it. So when it comes to like body theft, you're correct. There are inscriptions warning against grave robbery, but grave robbery was primarily about valuables that might be left in a grave, specifically things like the linens or the...
No.
No, it's the body.
There have been grave robbers in the past who will target specifically rich people's graves to get to the valuables that might be in there. But it depends on the culture. It depends on the people. It depends on the burial traditions and so on and so forth. But overwhelmingly throughout history, and maybe it is different in first century Judea, but it's the body. The body is the valuable thing. And also, what the fuck was Jesus supposedly buried with that people could steal?
I don't know. As far as I know, the Holy Grail, as someone mentioned earlier, went with Joseph Arimathea. Look, that is entirely fan fiction from the Middle Ages. Like, in my opinion, it was just, the grail that caught his blood, or the cup that caught his blood, was in Europe, and who would have brought it? Oh, Joseph Arimathea. That's a good idea. Like,
sure. Like, why not him?
I seem to be having, my mic said I wasn't. Can you hear me okay?
I can now. I don't know if you glitched out or something, but yeah.
Cool.
So it's an adventure.
tunics. There are these, and so what's surprising then, of course, is in our narratives, those things are left behind. Or when you have necromancers who would steal bodies, you're correct. They're not necessarily in Judea. This seemed to be more outside of Judea. You have spellcasters, necromancers. We have found skulls with like candles inside of them that could be evidence of necromancy. But normally that's what they would do. They just cut off the head. And especially if you're going to take that, just cut the head off. That's all you need for the spell. Just leave the body. Or hey, if you're going to be there anyways, and you're a dubious fellow who's into witchcraft, you might like some free garments that are super expensive in the ancient world.
I don't know what he's talking about with necromancers, right? I'm feeling
wildly.
Like seriously, where is this? Middle East or Middle Earth? Like seriously. Yeah. But, if somebody was taking bodies because they were used in rituals, it wouldn't be the person it would be wealthy people doing this sort of black magic kind of thing. It would be grave robbers. They wouldn't just go, oh, well, we'll just take the head because that's all I need for a spell. No, it'd be people that are like, hey, people will pay good money for the head, the liver, the feet, the hand. There was something called a hand of glory, which was a convicted murderer's hand that had a candle on it that was presumably gave you the ability to look into the occult realm. Seriously, they would just, instead of cutting it up and taking all the bits they needed, it was a lot easier. Just take the entire fucking thing. Just take the body, cut it up somewhere else, and then sell the parts.
Or physicians, or if it's rich people who want it for a specific ritual, why would they steal a dead, rotting corpse that had been crucified when they could just nab a homeless person and no one will stop them? Then they have a fresh body.
Or a woman, and no one cares. Oh, ugh.
Yeah.
Hey, there's no nice Walmart to go to get stuff here. You don't think that there are people who found a corpse on the side of the, they're not Jewish, but pagan.
I think I would call it at there is no nice Walmart. Actually, I think I would put the end of the stop there.
Right, just finish, Trent. Just finish, or switch to a question or something.
Be great, bro. You find linen.
Depends on how nice the linen is, right? I mean, it seems like Joseph and Nicodemus were doing a bit of an emergency burial. They probably just threw him in whatever they could find.
I'm sure the fact of the matter is just having that kind of stuff, you would want to get that and steal it. That's what I think most of the inscriptions are dealing with here.
But would you though? And also, according to the story, the linen was still there and the body was not. So is the Bible lying, Trent? Is it unreliable?
But when it comes to someone being in a tomb, as I said before, that's not implausible. We have the Yehoanan evidence from that skeleton that was found. So clearly the idea why would they give the body to someone, a Jew, to be buried? It did happen. So we have previous precedent for that going on.
It did. Yeah, I will concede that. It did happen. It was unusual. Sure.
Yeah, not a miracle though, but that's not the problem. It's one more thing that makes the story less plausible. Yes. But that isn't the reason there's contention over the story.
For Romans giving a crucified body
to someone to bury it, that it wasn't simply left on a cross, that it could be given a proper burial in a tomb. So we know that did happen. So it's not out of the bounds for someone to request that. In this case, someone like Joseph of Arimathea.
And that would be in keeping, in fairness to you, Trent, that would be in keeping with, I don't believe it's historical, but the Gospels want to say that Pilate sort of increasingly distances himself from responsibility for the death of Jesus. And so if you really did feel as guilty as he said in the Gospels to do so, then maybe somebody asking for a proper burial would make him go yeah, okay, sure, have that. It'll make me feel a little bit better.
His wife might have bugged him. His wife said, I had a horrible dream, and this man, I want to, and that's why she's actually venerated as a saint in the Eastern Christian Church because of that.
Yeah, well, I don't think Pilate, in any story other than the Gospels, we have we don't get any idea of Pilate as someone who's like a compassionate man who obviously cares very much about his wife and cares about this man Jesus. I think he was a ruthless leader who couldn't give a squat about Jesus.
When I read the history about him, I find
and part of that is just because of the way they wrote the story. It's for plot reasons, we can't have the Jews do it, so we have to make the Roman do it, and it just all the things. Mark seems to be having tech issues, which he did allude to, but he may have to do a restart or something like that. It's been known to happen. Oh goodness. All right, he may be back. Let's see. Nope, he's gone, at least for a moment. But I he probably shall return. So, maybe there he is.
Yeah, I just wanted to drop out and in. Yeah, I don't know. Am I better? I don't know. I have no idea.
I thought the necromancers got you.
No, of course, yeah. I knew I shouldn't have been keeping that linen in my pocket.
It's true. They're after the linen, folks.
They're all after the linen.
This is why we're wearing mixed fabrics now. It's to keep those necromancers and Yahweh spirits away and things.
Do you notice that, like, whenever we start to get into, is this plausible, is that plausible, it always, like, their refutation of all of these hypotheses relies on all of the details being true. Right? Like, all of it has to be true. Like, the linens were still there. Were they? How do we check that? How do we know that? That was the story, but do we know that for sure? We don't. Like, it's just kind of weird. And I get that he's doing an internal critique here, but at the same time, is it because he'll say, is it impossible that the body was given back to the Jews in order to bury as per their cultural customs rather than the usual fate of a body? No, it's not impossible, but is it impossible that the grave robbers, if they existed, take the body and leave the linens? No, that's not impossible either. Right. So I don't, if you want to appeal to, well, is it possible that all these things happened? I think you've got to grant that it's possible that just something mundane happened and legend grew around it. But he's not willing to do that, which is weird.
Yeah, because then even if we grant the one thing, then the other stuff is still more likely, and we can't just dodge around that.
He is someone who's constantly embattled with the Jewish authorities and dealing with them, and they're a giant headache for him. Like when the golden plates that Philo describes, they had an image of Caesar on it that were brought into Jerusalem, and there's a whole riot about it. And Pilate does not just drop the hammer on the Jews in response to that. He has to play politics there. So I think that fits in also with the historical data.
Well, speaking of golden plates, I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
And by the way, one of the witnesses, David Whitmer, said God told him Mormonism was a false church. We don't find anything like that with the apostles.
Well, Joseph Smith's Mormonism was a false church, but he still saw an angel give the golden plates. The golden plates were real. The angel Moroni was real. It's just that Joseph Smith's religion was false.
And it could be natural explanation of heightened, we're in the woods playing with our eyes closed, seeing with the eyes of faith, or demonic in the sense that, look, if I was a devil, I'd want to make a religion that says, you don't believe Jesus is God, and you don't even pray to Jesus, because Mormonism, you don't pray.
Wait, if I was the devil and I wanted to convince a whole bunch of Christians to follow the wrong religion when it should be Judaism, I would give somebody the power to appear like he rose from the dead. Jesus demon confirmed. Like this is lethal for his own argument. Right? That it was the devil that did these so-called miracles to fool people, because then you have to concede that the devil has the power and the motive to do that for your own.
Yeah, and oh goodness. Speaking of necromancers, I also it had been tickling my brain, but I seem to recall that Jesus was accused of, because he raised Lazarus, right? So he was accused of witchcraft and necromancy. That was one of the crimes.
It was definitely accused of being a false messiah, right?
Blasphemy. They accused that was the main thing, at least according to the Bible, is they accused him of claiming divinity, being the Son of God, and claiming to be the Messiah. And that's sort of where the big issue comes from, because to the extent we're able to determine anything historical about this story, it seems like Jesus was very careful to never call himself God. He was like, I'm the door, I'm not the Father, that sort of thing. The Trinitarianism comes along a little bit later, the Nicaeans and so on and so forth. There's other variants of Christianity that are, less popular today, but had an equal claim at the time, like the Arians, for instance, who believed that Jesus was not the same as the Father. They did hold that he was also a God, but he, like humans, was created by the Father, and so could not be the same thing as the Father. because all the arguments about first causes and designers and first movers and creators and all this stuff, it doesn't work if the creator creates itself, especially after the universe has already been existing, you know? So the Trinity, it doesn't work on another level. There's reasons Rome picked the Nicene version of Christianity, but that's another topic for another time. The point is that Jesus was careful not to say he was God because of the blasphemy laws.
And I believe he refers to as being like the one who sent me kind of thing, as that sort of alludes to God having sent him, which the Trinity sort of glosses over by saying, yeah, they were two different persons, but they were the same God, which is weird and doesn't make any sense. But, you know, throughout all of this, he never clearly says that even he was the son of, like, he sort of says that I am the son of God, but he sort of suggests that everybody is the son of God. You know, he doesn't actually say it outright that, hey, you know, God, when he says God is my father, he sort of says God is everyone's father.
Right. He even goes so far as to bring up one of the Psalms. He quotes it and says, is it not written, ye are all gods? So when people come at him saying, are you God though? And he'll be like, well, aren't we all? It's actually one of my favorite passages. It's like, okay, I can get down with that one. You know, sure, I'll grant Jesus is a God on the same grounds that we're all the same level of God. And there's something to that. We have the ability to influence the world around us. We can do all kinds of interesting, miraculous things, like communicate mind to mind by making funny noises with our faces.
Yeah, I think it falls short of what my definition of a God would be. I think that if you're sort of going, well, a God is just something that animals can't do. Well, I mean, big deal. There's things animals can do that I can't.
That's true. So I've always wanted to fly.
Yeah. I was thinking more of making an ink cloud anytime I'm scared to evade predators, but that's good too.
I'm just picturing you in a debate, throwing an ink cloud.
Octopus.
Similar to how, when Martin Luther brings about Protestantism, it'd be one thing for him to say, I think these Catholics are wrong and I don't believe in God and I don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus. It's another thing to say, I think that their religious interpretation is incorrect. And it's because of my belief. It's because of the strength of my belief in the original message that I want to be able to say this. I don't know, man. I feel like somebody who, I think you've got a reverse Paul, which I think is even stronger. For example, if Paul was said to have gone the other way around, if Paul was a Christian and then fell out with Peter, fell out with the early church, decided that Christianity is bogus, but he still saw the risen Christ. He was in like excommunication with the early Christian community, but he just couldn't, until the day he died, couldn't deny that he'd seen this vision. I think that'd be exceptionally strong evidence in favor of the resurrection.
But the problem is with Whitmer, he says God confirms one religion, and then he says God confirmed another religion to him. I'm going to believe God over Whitmer in saying that if you're going to accuse God of these direct kind of contradictions, it more shows a problem with your character and testimony.
Okay, so that's sort of pre-sup stuff. You're just going into, I'm going to believe God. Well, have you spoken to God? Like, I mean, spoken to or read something that God... Sorry, I either StreamYard or my microphone is having conniptions. I do apologize. It is getting unruly down here. But, so this is the thing. You're basically going, well, the Bible is God's word, and that's a presupposition. That is begging the question. You're automatically saying, well, this is God saying it, instead of what we know, which is men wrote this book.
I mean, if you're going to say that they were written by the traditional authors are not God. So, fuck. What one thing we do have, scripture, gospel, you might say, is Jester sends us a super chat for $5. Thank you so much, Jester. And says, but I created myself next Tuesday when I'll create nil. I promise I'll get around to it that time.
I'm not sure if that's Jesterism or Next Tuesdayism. I'm not sure, but I'm on board. I'm never saw a cult I didn't like. I'm on board.
I do enjoy Next Tuesdayism. That's pretty fun. All right, 1 second here. Apparently, our good friend Nitty Kademus of the Nitties is doing a show, and we probably we're almost done because we're a few minutes from the very end here. So I want to plug in Nitty for our forwarding capability. Oh, I guess it is. Are they doing a budget scripture thing today? Maybe.
Don't know.
I don't know. It says
I didn't say anything.
Something. I can't tell. I can't even tell which one's the vertical stream, because if there's an indication, it's not in the first few words, and the thumbnails are the same. So if you end up in a stream not to your preference, you can just switch to the other one. But I'll put in a redirect for the knitters. It'll be neat. So yeah, stay tuned for that once we wrap.
Fascinating discussion of Mormonism. Thank you for watching Unbelievable on whether Mormonism is true. Actually, going back to the resurrection, I do have one final question for you, Alex, and I've got a final question for you, Trent, as well. Alex, what would it take for you to believe in the resurrection? You know, what standard of evidence, what quantity of evidence would you like to see for you to put your faith in this?
I don't know if there's any particular instance. Of course, if I had a Damascus experience of my own, even if it were just visionary, but I was told to, believe in this particular narrative, which I suppose is the kind of thing Trent must believe happened to Paul. He didn't see the physical Jesus, but maybe Jesus kind of like told him that he was physical when he resurrected. And I know not now, but like I was at one point, and you will be at one point, and go and ask Peter about it rather than just appearing physically himself.
Alex, what if you were with Stephen Woodford and you saw this stuff, and Stephen said, "What the hell was that voice going on? Like I couldn't see everything, but what was that about?" Would that increase your credence a bit?
I am not sure that it would. No.
I mean, I should have picked a better witness there to be honest.
No, I know. I love Steve. I wouldn't think that he was lying, but unless I thought it myself.
Just saying, because you could worry like, oh, I saw something. Maybe my mind's playing tricks on me. Acts chapter 9's reference to Paul's testimony says it wasn't purely a subjective experience. His traveling companions saw a light. They saw something also. It's not purely mental.
By the reason I say this is
right, but that sounds like such a convenient add-on too. Like it wasn't just me; my friends saw it too. And it's not a super high bar either, because like, to go back to my kids thing, for example, the people running around who are like, Amber can't possibly have children. One of my children, two of them technically, have appeared on my channel. I had my oldest on to talk about their work setting up an LGBT alliance group in their high school before they graduated. For Pride Month or some, whatever the reason was. I was like, other people could benefit from this information. So I had my oldest on to come talk about it. So other people have seen some of my children,
Yeah.
And yet there's conspiracy people that are like, it's impossible. I don't know. It's nutty. The point is, other people saw it too, is what you would expect someone to say if they're making something up. But also, it doesn't actually help your case if people are really, really dedicated into saying a thing isn't true.
Convinced me is because visions can be true. This is a big Dale Allison point, right? Like, we often think that like if something's visionary, it's therefore false. Visions can be true. Maybe all of the appearances to the disciples were all visionary. Maybe when they went up the mountain, they saw a vision of Jesus. Maybe the 500 saw Jesus above them, as the Greek may imply. I'm not going to die on that hill either. But
could have been above them on a hill.
It doesn't. It could have been above them on a hill. Could have been more than 500 people, and it was above them. Who knows? But what I want to say is that doesn't mean that it's false, right? It could be like a real vision. Real visions are supposed to happen in the Gospels. God warns Joseph in a dream in the infancy narrative, and we're not told. We don't think that he was like mistaken just because it was a visionary experience. So that would be fine. So something like that. But historically speaking, I think that evidence of particular apostles, if we had firsthand testimony to experience of the bodily resurrected Christ, and also good evidence that those apostles were persecuted and martyred for that particular belief, not just being a Christian, not just spreading the message of Christ, but specifically the belief in the resurrection, who was sort of persecuted for that reason. I think that would be great evidence. I don't know if that'd be enough to convince me, but I think I probably wouldn't want to do a debate like this on the matter, because it would be incredibly difficult.
Better than what we've got.
But we just don't have that kind of evidence. We have, at best, sort of second-hand account. We have first-hand accounts of visionary experiences, or at best second-hand accounts of experiences which seem to be physical on one reading, but seem maybe not to be on others. And that just isn't enough for me to place my faith and trust in Jesus of Nazareth, at least the post-resurrected Jesus of Nazareth.
And Trent, I'm going to give you the final word. What in your mind is the kind of the strongest piece of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus?
I think the strongest piece of evidence is the uniqueness of the proclamation itself, that you would, and N.T. Wright talks about this in his book on Jesus, that if the apostles merely said, I've seen Jesus in heaven, they might say, of course, he's in Abraham's bosom, he's with all the righteous waiting in heaven. No, I really felt his presence. Yeah, we feel them praying for us and interceding for us. That's not enough to proclaim this fact, this idea of bodily resurrection that was reserved for the eschaton, reserved for the end of the world. For them to proclaim that boldly and uniquely, I would say there has to be something. It's not just his followers, but also a persecutor who showed no signs of guilt or remorse, but simply had this interaction with Jesus.
What do you mean no signs of guilt or remorse? You have his testimony.
Right.
Do you have like a secret gospel of the psychologist who was treating Paul and was like, well, he shows no signs of guilt or remorse? What do you mean?
Yeah, and at one point he basically denies Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, he's supposed to have seen all these miracles. He's threatened with death, and he goes, no, I deny Jesus 3 times, in fact. That was Peter, sorry. Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Yes. Right? So it's like, well, where are these denials? Well, Peter was presumably supposed to be front center row for these miraculous events and absolutely believed that Jesus was God, and he denied him 3 times.
Yeah, similarly, his family didn't believe him either, right? Like, they make a big deal out of his brother converting after his death, but when he goes back home to visit his family, suddenly his miracle mojo is completely gone. Like, not only do they not believe, but their disbelief apparently makes his magic wink out.
Right.
Why is that in the story? I don't understand, but it's just whatever.
Other people were privy to, so not purely a mental interaction. I think all of that together, we need to seek out what is the best explanation for that. And that, look, they were either sincere or insincere. I don't think, even though we've quibbled about the martyrdom stuff, I think most critics do not believe insincere. They would go with sincere. And then do we say, okay, sincere, they did see something or they didn't see something? The fact that we have all this different evidence for not just individuals, but groups, cross-referencing it, being able to check a tomb that is locatable nearby to see what happened to the body. And finally, and I would encourage Alex to talk about this, and maybe he'll dive deeper into it in an episode of his show, or we'll talk about it, or you could have an academic on who specializes in this. I think the Christian miracles that have gone on later in history, inclling what I mentioned at the beginning of the show, like
if you
do not say Our Lady of Fatima. Please do not say that.
Right. But if you bring in the later miracles, then you have to allow the miracles from every other religion. And does that mean every other religion is true too?
Yeah. And that's what he was talking about, like Alex was talking about, where it's intellectual inconsistency. You're sort of saying, hey, there's these reports of there's reports of miracles from every single religion, Trent. So you would have to allow them as well in order to be intellectually consistent.
I mean, hell, I've got atheist miracles that I'm about ready to just chalk up to nil because no God is coming forward to take credit for them, you know?
Like, look, you're worried, like, well, do we have first and second hand? Look, we've got newspaper accounts of people at Fatima seeing, not just seeing that, but saying...
Of course. Okay. Fatima. So the supposed miracle where people stayed out all day in the sun, saw vastly different things. Some people didn't see anything, and they claim that we have photographic evidence of it, where if you look at the photograph, it's a picture of what looks like the sun and nothing else.
Like, yeah, no one doubts the sun exists, guys. Come on.
Oh boy. And I must say that part of the miracle of Fatima was one of the children saying that she was given a prophecy by the Mother Mary about the death of a pope. But when she came out with it, it was a secret and she couldn't tell anybody, and she only revealed it after the death of said pope. Like, I didn't know this before I did a segment on it. It is the worst prophecy claim I have ever heard. So she basically refused to tell anybody what the prophecy was. And then after these events happened, she went, oh, yeah, that was the prophecy. It was a secret. I couldn't tell you, but now I can reveal it to you.
Mm-hmm. I can reveal it.
Really miraculous. Just yeah. There's no other explanation for how she could have known that after it happened. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Now, if she'd written it down and like mailed it to herself with a postage address, you know, the cancellation.
Yeah. That would have been good.
Yeah.
Their clothes miraculously dried, puddles dried up. We've got photographs of the apparition at Zatoun. So what worries me is like,
that's not a miracle. That's evaporation.
Photographic news.
That's evaporation, my guy.
I mean, you
puddles dry up.
Miraculous evaporation.
I mean, but as far as I know, like people said, hey, these miracles occurred, but other people said, yeah, nothing miraculous occurred. So who do we believe? That the puddles miraculously dried up, or that they just dried up normally, and some people went, oh, it's a miracle, and some people went, yeah, I didn't see anything unusual. Holy crap.
I mean, maybe it happens every time, but maybe it is a miracle. Never mind the science. It just is miraculous.
Paper evidence of these supernatural things. My concern, and I guess for any skeptic who is watching, I would say, look, you're looking for likely things. Be open-minded and ask yourself, look, what's more probable here? All supernatural.
Trent doesn't understand how skepticism works. We're not looking for an explanation and just picking the most probable or least unlikely one. We don't need an explanation because I don't know is a sufficient answer. If you want us to believe your answer, you have to convince us of that.
Yes, and that requires sufficient evidence, which you do not have.
Counts are false, or at least one of them is true. And if at least one of them is true, perhaps you shouldn't at least be a strict naturalist and then just follow the evidence from there.
Well, Trent Horn, Alex O'Connor, it's been such a rich discussion. Thank you so much.
I would say I'm a provisional naturalist, right? So I provisionally think that only natural things exist until such time as I've been presented with something that is not natural, right? Because all I've ever seen throughout my entire life is natural things. Now, if you want me to believe that there are extra things then you've got to be able to demonstrate them, which you haven't done. You're just saying, hey, open your mind to the fact that there could be supernatural things out there. Sure. But for the moment, until I'm actually presented with one, I don't think they exist.
Yeah. I'm as I'm frequently saying, I'm happy to be wrong because then I learn more. And then, you know, one of my favorites is this is where epiphanies come from, is discovering you were wrong about something. And then the truth starts connecting with other things, you know, and new ideas pop out. And it's one of the peak experiences of life. I love finding out I don't try to be wrong. I try to be right. But part of trying to be right is I find out I'm wrong sometimes. And I love that feeling. It's one of my favorite things. So I'm open to learning everything that I thought I knew about how the universe works was mistaken. And there are actually miracles. That would be great. If we could figure out how to harness those miracles, that would be more helpful, because there's a lot more miracles that could use some doing around these parts. But c'est la vie. In any case, that's our debate. Trent's final word, his greatest piece of evidence is, what if miracles, though?
Yeah.
We have a what if in an evidence debate. I love it. We've been at this for nearly 3 years. Yet to be convinced.
Well, Trent's been at it for a lot longer, and he's yet to give a decent argument, I think. I mean, when I say decent argument, one that doesn't rely on already believing in the textual source that he's using, which to me is not good evidence, you know.
Yeah. Aye. Alrighty. So For those of you joining us late, quick reminder, we're going to be on Mark's next time, but we're skipping next week because I'm going to be in Nashville. I'll try to keep people updated. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe on Mark's. Even though the spirits keep abducting him, the necromancers are after him. He does.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm good. Too. I was hoping that my system would hang in there for the rest of the thing, so it did. It's a miracle. All praise Fatima or Drop Bears or Nil or whatever. It's a miracle. I am your Lord and
miracles. Savior. Look at that.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
All right. So the stream should take you over to Nitty's. I'm not sure what the heck he's up to, but it's usually fun. Make sure you say hello and subscribe there too if you haven't, because he's been trying to rebuild his channel the past year or so.
Yeah. He's kind of doing a Kipless budget scripture Saturday. So he usually does that with Dr. Kip, but I think him and Tommy are sort of just doing it themselves, which is all good. All good. It should be a fun time. So go and check it out. Give Nibby a sub.
Saturday.
I'm not sure what happened with Nitty channel. I think he deleted it at some point. I think he sort of then came back. So it was just really unfortunate. So yeah, give a bit of a charity to Nitty. He deserves it. So yeah. If you have already, thank you.
It is good content. Like he calls into. Instead of taking calls, like so many of our friends do here in the skeptic community, he finds Christian call-in shows and calls into their shows and has conversations with them. And it's pretty neat. So in any case, I'll let you evaluate for yourself. I'm just saying, check it out because you might like it. Thank you all so much for watching, for joining, for participating and making the world go round.
You are appreciated. I appreciate you. Yes, you. Yes, you in particular.
Yes, specifically you.
Yeah.
No, there's probably more, but
well, don't forget to like, subscribe, come back and check in. Ring the bell so you know when Ems is going live. She kind of puts on things when I can't watch in the middle of the night. I don't blame her for it, but I would like to see it. So definitely ring the bell. Occasionally she will go live with sort of no notice whatsoever. So we kind of rely on YouTube to not tell you about it. So, but it does help. It does help. It will tell you occasionally. So yeah, don't forget to hit the bell. And yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. I hopefully, I'm trying to get debates lined up myself. So I'm trying to get them lined up. It's hard work. It sort of takes a lot of organization. I'm trying to work with Skeptic Haven and a new channel that they've started up called The Thought Experiment, which I would love to see get up and running. It would be really good. So do try and support them. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Have you got anything else? Sorry, I kind of just took over hosting duty. I'm sorry, Amber. I'm just
it's all good. I'm just kind of I've been getting out of practice.
Hosting.
I haven't been able to do as many shows recently. I will try to do more in the middle of the night though.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Amber.
You know,
yes.
I do what I can.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is why we do this, is to hang out with you folks. We could record them, but it'd be less fun. Lives are more fun for everyone. So thank you for being here for that. We'll see you again soon, whenever that is. Until then, try not to die. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for June: Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Maya Adkisson, Robin Webster, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Liliball Trades, Deviant Outcast, Thriver Scapegoat, Katie Bluebird, Noise Ending, The Godless Engineer, Secular Felinist, and Alira the Free. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which also includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you all so much. because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.